Hello, dreamers and wanderers of imagination. Do you ever wonder what happens if the night sky itself decides to look back at you? You sit by the window, the world quiet, only the hum of the fridge and the breath of your own heartbeat filling the space. And then you notice it. That faint glimmer streaking across the upper dark, slower than a meteor, brighter than a star. You think it's just another comet on its harmless, icy journey. They call it 3I Atlas. It doesn't even sound threatening, just another scientific name with too many numbers and not enough poetry. But tonight, it feels different. The air feels heavier. Your chest tightens as if the planet itself just took a deep breath, and you'll be fully surprised what happens next. Because sometimes what we call comets aren't just rocks or ice. Sometimes they might be eyes. What if something has always been there, just out of sight? Something ancient, patient, drifting between stars, not to crash, but to watch, to listen, and to choose when to whisper back. So, before we dive back in, take a second to like and subscribe to the video, only if you're patient enough to enjoy our story tonight. And if you think more people should know this story, you know what to do. Share it with the dreamers, wanderers, and the quietly curious souls in your life. Tell me too, are you listening before bed, while working, or somewhere in the world I can only imagine? And don't forget to post your location in local time, as if we're all gathered around one shared midnight campfire. Now, dim the lights. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lean closer to the glass. 3. Atlas slides through the black like a vein of light, its tail whispering silver dust across the horizon. Astronomers say it's an interstellar object. Not from our solar system, not from anywhere near here. That alone makes you feel small, like the universe just sent a postcard written in a language of light. The radio murmurs updates. Object expected to pass within safe distance. They always say safe, as if that word has ever truly meant anything when it comes to space. The sky doesn't deal in safety. It deals in time and indifference. Still, people watch, kids point, couples take photos, some even name wishes after it. But in the stillness between the seconds, something odd begins. Out at sea, sensors begin to twitch. Instruments detect a faint electromagnetic pulse beneath the waves, not above, as if the ocean itself had blinked. The Navy chalks it up to interference. Marine labs get garbled data, repeating harmonics buried under noise, like a heartbeat slowed by millions of years. You don't know this yet, of course. You're just sitting by your window, watching that streak. But somewhere deep under the Pacific, something notices, something remembers. It's said the ocean holds more history than any library. Every sound ever made under its skin still ripples faintly, layered over itself like forgotten pages. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's why, when 3I Atlas enters Earth's gravitational embrace, those layers begin to peel. You've probably felt that uncanny silence before. When your phone dies in a storm, or when you wake at 3:11 a.m. and realize there's no sound at all. Not even your own breath. That silence lives here now, hovering just below the noise of civilization. Ships report their sonar flickering. Dolphins vanish from coastal tracking grids. One submersible returns with corrupted footage, static, then flashes of geometric light like reflections from deep crystal surfaces. It's absurd, you think. It's the ocean. There's nothing down there but pressure and darkness. Yet for the first time, the darkness feels crowded. A strange fact. We know more about Mars's surface than our own ocean floor. Isn't that curious? We stare upward with billion-dollar telescopes, but downward with cheap sonar, as if too afraid of what we might find mirrored back. You remember documentaries about whales, how they navigate using infrasonic songs that can travel thousands of miles. Imagine if something, or someone, has been listening all this time. Not from above, from below. You shift in your chair, lights from passing cars glinting like reflections on water. The comet streak seems to pulse in rhythm, slow and deliberate, like it's syncing with something. Or maybe it's your own pulse echoing the thought. Have you ever noticed how the ocean never sleeps? Even when calm, it murmurs, as if muttering secrets between waves. Maybe it's always been trying to tell us something, but we've mistaken its language for noise. A few scientists do notice patterns in the data, harmonic intervals repeating in ratios eerily close to whale song frequencies. But there's modulation, too organized to be random. Someone jokes it sounds like Morse code. Another realizes it is Morse code, but written in reverse time. If you could hear it, it would sound like this. We hear you. You blink. The thought passes like a dream. You imagine standing on the edge of an empty pier, the sea stretching black before you. You drop a stone into it, and the ripples never stop. They just grow quieter, deeper, until you can't tell if they've stopped or if you've simply gone deaf to them. The air feels colder now. Your reflection in the window trembles slightly, as if the glass is breathing. The comet's tail widens, a faint arc, but the news says nothing unusual. Still, you can't shake that prickling on the back of your neck, that primal awareness of being watched. You laugh at yourself, of course. What could be watching? A ball of cosmic dust? The ocean? And yet, somewhere far below, in blackness that sunlight has never touched, an eye opens. Not an eye like yours, but something vast and fluid, the color of old memory. It watches the sky with calm familiarity, as though it has been expecting this moment. If you could feel what it feels, you'd know the sensation isn't fear or curiosity. It's recognition, because what's arriving isn't a stranger, it's a signal long awaited. You've probably heard the phrase, as above, so below. It sounds poetic until it stops being metaphor. When the stars whisper, the sea answers, and between them, humanity, like the thin shimmer of foam between two endless mirrors. The comet glows brighter, the tides shift subtly, just enough to nudge coastal sensors. Somewhere in the Atlantic, a school of fish forms a perfect spiral. No one notices. No one connects it to the sky. Yet if you stood there knee-deep in the surf, you might feel the faintest hum under your feet, a vibration too regular to be wave-borne, almost like the ocean is thinking. You step back from the window, draw the curtains, and tell yourself it's just another night. But deep down, you sense something vast has begun, not an arrival, a reawakening. And if you listen closely, in the silence between heartbeats, you might just hear it breathing back. You wake from a light sleep you didn't know you took, cheek warm from the ghost of the curtain's edge, the room still and slightly stale, the way rooms get when the air forgets to move. The refrigerator hum has gone, replaced by the hush that comes just before a building sighs. Pipes settling, wood remembering its shape. You stand there for a moment, the world on mute, and the first thought that arrives is not about stars at all, but about water. You want a glass. That's it. Simple, ordinary thirst. It's the kind of human thing that breaks spellwork and anchors you in the most domestic of rituals. Open cabinet, pick a favorite cup, the one with a chip that never cuts you, fill, sip, swallow. Real life. Tap cold, mineral-tanged. And then, as if your body tuned itself without your permission, you notice the faintest tremor in the water's surface. Not a ripple you can see, more like a feeling that the water is listening. You chuckle. Maybe you're listening too hard, and the water is just water. Still, you hold the glass up to the window, to that same pane where your reflection earlier felt like a breathing twin, and you imagine the ocean is a glass like this, held up to a night sky, surface tense, waiting. Far out, beyond the sweep of coastal cities, a fleet of research buoys ride long-shouldered swells. Each buoy's underside hangs with sensors like brushed metal jellyfish, sampling temperature, pressure, salinity, sound. They've listened for decades, whales gossiping across basins, shrimp crackling like frying pans, storm-stomped surf talking in thunder syllables. Tonight, their feeds come alive with something new. Not loud, not bright, but patterned. The instruments shudder with it. A physiologist might say the ocean experiences an involuntary muscle memory, a shiver at cellular scale. The data scientists give it labels because that's what they can do. Burst, interval, phase-aligned anomaly. The labels are tidy. The feeling underneath is not. A station tech in a fleece jacket rubs her eyes. The graphs do that polite thing graphs do when they want to flag wonder without looking unprofessional. The lines align, peaks stack, valleys rhyme. She taps a pencil against the desk, glances at the clock, 3:11 a.m., which is statistically the hour when the universe likes to whisper, and writes a sticky note. Check for boat noise. It's always boats. It almost never is. She replays 5 minutes of the underwater soundscape. There it is, spaces between pulses so steady you could measure time with them. Only, if you fold the sequence backward, the cadence still makes sense, like a lullaby played in reverse. That's peculiar. That's not wind. That's not the cough of a whale. That's choreography. The deep answers in textures, not words. 1,000 meters down, water behaves like glass that remembers its liquid lineage. Pressure stacks like stone. Light has no passport. Yet life here keeps its own calendars, written in enzymes and patience. When you were little, you read that bioluminescence is cold light, the phrase so magical you tried to imagine touching it. Light you could cup without burning, light that would sit on your palm like a tame firefly and look up at you, curious. Tonight, in regions where the seafloor falls away like a continent turned on edge, microscopic lanterns blink in disciplined runs, waves of sparkle that carry information the way stadium crowds carry a message with their arms. If you could see it from space, the pattern would look like a long thought written across dark silk. Your ordinary fear slips in through the hallway like a draft. It's not a sharp fear, not a movie jump scare, more the feeling you get in a motel at 2 a.m. when you realize you know exactly where the ice machine is, but nothing else. And suddenly the wallpaper feels like it's listening. You stand at your own door and press your palm to the wood, because people do strange little checks like that when they want to confirm reality still locks and opens as expected. It does. And yet your mind insists on placing you alone on some fog-tasted pier, imagining a voice that is not a voice saying, "Yes, we are both awake now." A small truth to ground you. The laundry you meant to fold is still heaped like a domestic mountain range on your chair. There will be socks in there that have formed alliances. You can fix that in the morning. It's comforting to plan a conquest of socks. It reminds you the world includes agreeable, solvable problems. And still, the glass of water makes a soft circle on the counter, and you watch it as if watching a candle's throat. Marine Labs cross-check. Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, Southern. A scatter of pings reports the same thing. An underlying beat, near infrasound, consistent enough to be a metronome, irregular enough to feel alive. One dataset introduces an odd flavor, a tone that sits on top like a faint flute above drums. Someone jokes on a message thread. The choir's getting warmed up. Someone else replies with a yawn emoji. The thread scrolls, the way human proof of astonishment often scrolls past itself while it's happening. You put your phone face down. You do that sometimes to tell your brain it's allowed to be privately strange without being judged by glow. The apartment's geometry rearranges itself into a night map. The shadow of the plant shaped like a sea fan, the lamp's brass pole standing like a periscope, the rug's pattern suddenly resembling sound waves that forgot their water. You wonder, has anyone ever thought the ocean could be nervous? Not like fear, but like anticipation, the way the air in a theater gathers itself just before the curtain lifts. What would a sea wait for? A tide? A moon? A name spoken from very far away? Things you ask yourself in the midnight. If a planet could feel, would it store its feelings where the pressure keeps them honest? Would it choose the deepest trenches as its diaries and write in currents you can only read when a comet passes through the right key of gravity? The question floats there, harmless as a bubble, until you realize it gains weight each second you leave it unanswered. In laboratories lit like aquariums, with blue shift bleeding into everything, an algorithm tries to translate the harmonics. It hunts ratios, 2.3, 5.8, 13.21. Fibonacci, always a show-off. The sequence emerges in noise the way a shoreline emerges from fog, gradual, then obvious, then all you can see. One intern, hair in a lopsided bun, makes a note that the intervals match the migratory pacing of certain whale clans recorded 70 years ago. Another wonders aloud whether the pattern could be anticipatory mimicry, the deep rehearsing an old song because it knows the duet partner is returning. The room goes quiet in that way rooms do when someone says a sentence that touches the floor of the idea. You picture those whale routes like highways handled down through muscle memory, a map of the planet traced in breath. If something beneath the breath decided to rehearse, what then? With the ease of a bored magician, your mind pulls up trivia. Whales can sleep with half their brain, like they put one hemisphere on night watch while the other dreams of krill buffets. You envy that. Imagine answering emails with half a brain resting in a hammock. You've basically done it. The thought makes you smile. One of those small jokes you keep to yourself because it delights you to be your own audience at stupid o'clock. Out in the black, a submersible hums down an elevator shaft of salt. Its hull makes the sounds of a house settling at the bottom of the world. The pilot, a woman with salt and pepper hair in a tight braid, keeps her voice low, even though no one would hear in the vacuum of ocean if she shouted. 8,000 meters, she says, then clears her throat like an actor before a line. The sonar's display should be a monotone city of static. Instead, it shows gaps, negative shapes, as if something large and soft is moving with intention, making space where sound should be. She notes it, measures it, refuses to assign it any metaphor for the log. Later, she will remember it as the moment the deep breathed in and held it, the way a singer does just before the note that makes a song true. You think about breath, yours, the planet's. You think about how people living miles inland sometimes dream of tsunamis, not because they predict them, but because the subconscious seems to choose water when it wants to talk about overwhelm. You step toward the sink to rinse your glass and catch yourself peering into the drain's dark throat like it's a tiny trench. You shake your head. Enough! You are not about to hold a diplomatic summit with plumbing, and yet the house creaks, and your heart does that dear thing it does when a floorboard chooses to remember it's wood. It's fine. You tell yourself the old line, everything is okay. It's the line people use when they want to calm themselves and also dare the universe to disagree. The night does not disagree. It just waits. Ordinary fact. Somewhere a kettle shrieks on a ship. A crew member lifts it off the coil and grumbles about tea bags and the tyranny of string length. That is happening in your world at the same time as a pattern older than humanity hums under an entire ocean. Both are true. The alloy of reality is forged of tea and awe. On the coast of a small island, a field biologist stands alone with a parabolic microphone, the dish aimed at the surf. She's here for seabirds, to record their dawn arguments and bedtime trills. To catch the precise moment, night hands the shoreline back to gulls and terns. The battery indicator blinks its warning. Of course it does. And she frowns, then lifts the dish again, because the sea is speaking. She can't explain that sentence to anyone who hasn't stood in pants wet to the knee at 4 a.m. It's not literal, not magical. And yet, the long pull of the tide sounds organized, as if a drum line far offshore is practicing paradiddles in fog. She laughs at herself, then writes in the field notebook a question instead of a fact. What choreography belongs to water? She will spend months trying to answer it and spend the rest of her life happy. The answer never lands. You return to the window even though you promised yourself sleep 20 minutes ago. 3i Atlas still hangs like a long, deliberate scratch on glass, the tail fanning with the grace of something that knows it's being watched and doesn't mind. You wonder whether you're supposed to be afraid. The word supposed is doing a lot of work here. You settle for alert, a posture more like curiosity holding a flashlight than terror hiding in a closet. Still, there is that other feeling, the primitive one, that keeps checking the corners, the closet, the underbed space that is 3 dust bunnies away from organizing a civic council. The oldest brain says, alone is dangerous. The newer brain says, alone is peaceful. You hold both, a 2-handed cup. On a conference call where screens are gridded with tired faces, a geophysicist brings up methane releases. Subtle, measured in parts per million, but globally coincident. No one wants to say the word breathing because it anthropomorphizes a planet, which is a professional sin and a poetic instinct. Venting events, someone offers, as if the earth is complaining politely. The timing aligns too well with the undersea pulses. A biochemist suggests with unhelpful cheer that even bacteria keep time. A paleoclimatologist, halfway through a yawn, mutes her mic to swear tenderly at her cat, then unmutes to say that ancient records in ice show similar rhythmic patterns during periods we do not yet understand. Half the meeting writes emails while she speaks. The other half listens like a congregation that suspects a miracle might be happening in a church they only entered to escape the rain. Back in your kitchen, you catch yourself humming without melody, a note in your throat that feels like standing beside a refrigerator, except the refrigerator is the size of an ocean, and the hum means ready. The thought arrives with a neat thud. What if the ocean isn't reacting to 3i Atlas? What if it's recognizing it? The difference between those two verbs is the difference between flinching and welcoming, between stranger and expected guest, between fear and the soft, embarrassing joy of relief. You tilt the glass and watch the meniscus hold to the rim. People always say surface tension, like it's a science term only, but you feel it as a personal metaphor. The way you keep yourself contained, neat, spill-proof. Have you ever imagined what you'd be like without your own surface tension? If you let the interior ocean of you slosh out and meet whatever sky was available. It's a ridiculous midnight thought that makes you grin. Your grin looks over at the plant shadow and decides it's a friend. Congratulations. You've befriended a fern silhouette. It's going great. Joke number 2 arrives like a drowsy lifeguard. If the ocean is shivering, who gets it a sweater? You imagine a giant cardigan knitted by elderly sea turtles with impeccable taste. The image warms you more than coffee would. You tuck it away, a secret cartoon you can summon later when emails pile like weather. At a trench's rim, near where continental plates flirt with the violent affection of geology, a camera watches blackness for 30 hours. On hour 31, the blackness changes tone, not brightness. Tone, like a vowel lengthening. The camera can't record tone. You understand that. And yet the compressed file that travels up a cable and along a ship's spine and across a satellite dish into a basement room does something to the air in that room. The interns lean in. An older researcher who has sworn never to describe data as beautiful says, beautiful. And no one corrects him because it feels like a prayer, and prayers are evaluations of a kind. If your apartment had a barometer, it might dip a hair, not from weather, but from the way your chest learns to make room for a larger thought. You stand very still. You look again at the sky through a crowded city's frame, and the comet's tail blurs, then sharpens, like your eyes are an old television set trying to lock onto a channel. You whisper, because whispering is the language we reserve for truths we're not authorized to announce loudly. I think you know each other. You don't know who you're addressing. The ocean outside the reach of your vision? The streak of alien intent? Or the you who has decided to believe in a duet? A quiet question nudges the edge of your mind, refuses to leave until you look straight at it. If they have always known, what else have they agreed on without us? The shape of that question could be frightening if you stand too close. From a small step back, it looks like permission. To be a witness instead of a protagonist, to be held by a world that has more conversations than you'll ever be invited to. It's humbling in the best way, like being the kid allowed to sit in the back while the adults talk about the real world. And realizing the back seat is the perfect place to watch. You turn off the kitchen light. The apartment becomes a softer instrument. Past the glass, the comet keeps moving on a curve that was calculated months ago and rewritten 5 minutes ago by a force that looks nothing like gravity on paper. You don't need the math. You carry the feeling instead. The ocean is a great animal. The sky sent a familiar scent. The animal lifts its head. In the darkest trenches, along a ridge where chemical gardens bloom like lilies of stone, something that is not a city lights itself, not constant light, but the secret handshake of flicker. The pattern is so patient, so self-assured, that a human watching might call it ancient, even if it were made new this minute. A title some biologist once gave these places returns to you: oases. It is such a terrestrial word for a place where earth and starfall trade recipes in heat and salt. Tonight, oasis means meeting point. You stand there a while longer than you intended, longer than any rational sleep schedule permits, and you negotiate with your future self about the morning you'll owe. Future you shrugs. They've seen worse. You step away at last, but not before placing the glass beside the sink like a tiny monument. The water settles, the surface smooths. If it could speak in a voice you could understand, it might say, "Count with me. 1, 2, 3. The pulses are almost too low to feel, almost. And then your bones know them. When you finally lie down, the pillow smells faintly of detergent, and the outside world of you, the day caught in a cotton filter. You imagine the buoy fleet as a constellation of ears. You imagine the trench as a mouth, about to form a word so slow it will take hours to finish, years to understand. And you imagine yourself, small and exactly the right size, perfectly placed between a sky that recognizes an ocean and an ocean that recognizes a sky. Your phone buzzes once on the dresser, a push alert you don't read. It could be about traffic. It could be about tides. Either way, tomorrow will have roads and water. You close your eyes, in that syrupy pre-sleep where reason loosens its tie. You see the comet's tail as a long fingertip touching the sea, and the sea answering with a smile that looks exactly like a wave. You wake to the soft percussion of rain, the kind that turns a city into a shell and your room into an ear. It's not morning yet, only a paler shade of night, and you lie there with your eyes open, clock-red numbers pretending to be tiny lighthouses. Somewhere far away, you imagine the ocean receiving rain like a message, each drop a dot in a code that's been falling for eons. You don't move. You listen. You realize you've been doing that a lot lately, letting the world play through you, like you're a radio with a patience setting. In a building where the elevators rarely arrive at the floor you want on the first try, a marine acoustics lab murmurs its own sleepless symphony. Banks of servers breathe, monitors glow, and the bitter comfort of old coffee thickens the air. A graduate student in a sweater that used to belong to someone more optimistic toggles spectrograms until the screens look like storm maps. You watch from that strange second-person vantage you've adopted in this story, your consciousness hovering beside her shoulder, a polite haunting, as she drags a window over a band of sound, and the picture sharpens into ladders of color. There, she whispers to herself, because when you really see a thing, you can't help but announce it to the room, even if you're the only mammal awake. The signal rides low, almost below hearing, a series of pulses so regular that the software keeps trying to auto-classify it as engine noise. It isn't. It changes tempo like a living thing changes breath when it remembers something important. And the harmonics make the hair along your arms find its vote and stand. You don't need a physics degree to feel the logic folding inside those overtones, the way the second and third harmonics stack like scaffolding on meaning. If language is a kind of architecture, these are arches learning to hold weight. Someone once told you that if you hum a note in a bathroom, the tile will decide whether to be a friend or a heckler. The ocean, it turns out, has chosen friend. Across basins, the salt is carrying a rhythm that lands in labs as neat geometry, lines, ladders, bands, but reaches your bones as an invitation. You inhale. The rain teases the sill. The city sighs. In a quiet part of your brain that no app has harvested yet, you feel the beat. A senior researcher with a name that sounds like a glacier arrives with keys jangling like small chimes. He's the sort of scientist television shows would cast as appealing but distracted, though in life he's only distracted and endearingly poor at door locks. He leans over the grad student's shoulder and breathes a polite cloud onto the glass. "Play it," he says, and you brace instinctively, the way you do when a song someone loves is about to fill the room and you hope to love it too. The room becomes a temple to low frequencies. At first, it's just a throb that seems too simple to be interesting, a bass line with a day job. But then you notice it's counting, not out loud, not in numbers, but in ratios that make your ribs remember music class. 2 beats, pause, 3, 5, pause, 8. The pulse plets itself like a braid you could follow into a forest. The ceiling tiles seem to develop a heartbeat. The grad student closes her eyes. The senior researcher nods without meaning to, because the body recognizes logic faster than the mind can annotate it. You sit up in bed because, weirdly, you can almost hear it too, through the wall of night. You hold your breath to give the world room. The sound isn't coming from your apartment, obviously, but it feels like it is. A pressure at the edges, a hush insisting on shape. You feel alone in the way one does in hotel corridors, where every door is a story and every carpet is an apology for the echo. You're not scared exactly, but you're aware of distance between you and other sleepers, between you and the shore, between you and whatever is composing that patient drumline under the sea. The fear is small and ancient. It sits in your throat like a coin on a tongue. It asks the same question it always asks. If you call out, who answers? At the lab, someone runs a cepstral analysis, a way of seeing the echoes inside echoes, a mirror held up to a mirror, until the pattern either collapses or becomes a hallway. The hallway extends. Peaks repeat at intervals that look suspiciously like syllables. Not human syllables, no. Too slow, too long, but syllables nonetheless. Sound units fenced by purpose. The senior researcher prints the plot on paper because sometimes you need to feel the weight of a thing in your hands to believe in it. The paper is warm. He turns it upside down. Because scientists sometimes tilt the world like crossword puzzles when they're about to solve them, you retrieve a memory to ground you. The time you tried to descale your kettle with vinegar, and the entire apartment smelled like a pickle festival. You survived that day. You can survive whatever the ocean is composing at 0407. The thought makes you smile, a tiny grin in the dark. Joke number 1 arrives in a robe, yawning. If whales are about to start reciting poetry, you hope they at least rhyme krill with thrill once for you. The lab cross-references with decades of cetacean recordings. The pulses align with blue whale song intervals, but the structure is wrong, or right in a way Earth has not yet auditioned. In humpback choruses, you can sometimes detect call and response. Here I am, followed by, we are too. This is different. It's more like, the door is open, followed by a long patient, we remember where you live. The researchers do not write that down. They write down numbers. You reach for your notebook because the glow of your phone feels rude in the presence of these frequencies. You write the question that has been knocking softly all night. What if meaning arrived first as a feeling and only later as a sentence? You stare at the question like it might answer itself if you look tenderly enough. It does not. It does, however, open a small window in your mind that lets in an idea. Language is not just what you say. It's the room you build for a thought to sit in until it's brave enough to speak. At sea, a pair of hydrophones spaced a few kilometers apart pick up time delays that allow triangulation. The pulses aren't diffuse. They're coming from depth, from a region where pressure is the deity of every calendar. The location data, as it resolves, draws a constellation on a map that makes a junior analyst say, "No way," with the soft reverence people usually reserve for meteor showers and back-row confessions. The dots echo a shape, a spiral that matches the projected inbound path of 3i Atlas weeks ago. Water remembers, or else water imitates with impeccable taste. You make coffee even though your hands do not strictly deserve caffeine. The drip machine gurgles like a friendly bog. The aroma sneaks down the hallway with a swagger. There's comfort in this ritual. Filter, grounds, button. In a world of untranslatable trills and abyssal metronomes, you can still count on a mug warming your palms. Ordinary fact: your favorite mug has a hairline crack that you ignore because denial is a love language. You promise yourself you'll stop using it when it finally leaks. You won't. Joke number 2 steps out of the steam. If an alien hears your coffee maker, will it assume you worship kettles? To be fair, you basically do. The researchers try to encode the pulse train into notation. A composer would laugh or cry because the durations are monstrous by staff paper standards, whole notes that last minutes, rests that feel like seasons. If symphonies are cities, this is tectonics with a tempo marking. They compress the time to make it audible in one sitting. What emerges is eerie and gorgeous and slightly terrifying. A song that seems to climb a staircase built of fog, each step a promise. In the compressed version, a human ear can finally catch the overtones, the way they flare and blend like stained glass heating slightly in sun. You sit with your coffee, the rain easing into a finer script, and ask yourself the next question that will not leave until acknowledged. What if the ocean's language has always been legible, but only at a time scale we refuse to inhabit? You picture a conversation that takes months to deliver a sentence, but says exactly what it means. The thought is either a nightmare for messaging apps or salvation for attention spans. Either way, something inside you relaxes at the idea that not everything urgent is important, and not everything important will ever be urgent. A fisheries vessel miles away from any theory watches its deck lights flutter in sequence with no cause the electrician can find. The radio picks up a faint thudding like distant fireworks heard through a pillow. The skipper, whose superstitions are both elaborate and well-fed, orders a tray of offerings to the sea. Bread, a little rum, a song he refuses to admit is a song. The crew obliges because rituals exist for a reason, and because it feels better to be part of a conversation than to be the only one speaking. Somewhere in the dark, something answers with a perfect interval that makes the youngest deckhand's eyes go glassy. He says nothing about the way his grandmother hummed that same interval when she shelled peas on a hot back porch. Memory travels in odd vehicles. In the lab, a linguist arrives, barefoot in sneakers, hair in a bun that looks like a galaxy decided to form on a human head for a weekend. She has spent years modeling syntax in birdsong and carries the kind of exhaustion earned only by arguing with parrots. She listens once, twice. On the third listen, she maps the pulse timing to a tree of possible structures and realizes the pattern holds under resegmentation. That is, no matter where she chooses to place the bar lines, meaning it seems still emerges. Human languages rarely do that. This is either nonsense or a design that regards variability as a feature, not a bug. Her smile is sleepy and ferocious. "They planned for us to be clumsy," she murmurs, as if grateful. You remember something from a nature documentary, the kind you let run in the background while you do dishes. Coral polyps feed at night, their small mouths open to plankton like slow-motion fireworks. The narrator spoke in vowels as round as worlds. You picture those mouths now, tiny and patient, and feel foolish for ever thinking patience equals passivity. What if the reef has always been a library, and tonight the stacks awaken, sorting themselves into aisles your satellites can finally read? A curious piece of trivia bumps your shoulder. The word salt shares a root with salary, because people used to be paid in it. Salt keeps, preserves, remembers. Signals in salt. The phrase swivels in your mind like a lighthouse lens. It makes a practical kind of sense that memory would travel best in brine. Your tongue, you realize, carries both language and salt every time you speak. The body is such a good metaphor for itself, you want to applaud it. Joke number 3. Taps the mic. If you're 57% water, shouldn't you get a share of the ocean's royalties? It occurs to you, gently, not as an accusation, that you are afraid of being the last person awake. The fear doesn't need teeth. It just needs a room too quiet and a hallway too long. You're not a child, and yet the child brain keeps a closet on retainer. You open your apartment door and peek at the corridor purely to let your senses tally reality. The exit sign glowing emergency chic, the elevator's patient boredom, somebody's forgotten umbrella slumped like a tired crow. It helps, this inventory. The world contains ridiculous umbrellas, therefore the world still turns. Back at the lab, the team aligns the deep pulses with satellite data. A thin string of plankton fluorescence curls across the Pacific in a line that looks like moving calligraphy. Algae blooms don't do that. Not so tidy, not so rhythmic. Someone jokes that if the ocean is spelling, the first word is hell, and everyone laughs because humor is a life jacket you don't have to ask for. Then the laughter dies because the next frame makes the letters too obvious to be dismissed. They're not letters, not ours, but they rhyme with them. Curves like vowels, hooks like consonants. The bloom brightens at intervals that match the harmonic flares in the pulses. Above, a satellite blinks with a kind of astonishment no machine can feel, but you do on its behalf. You take a breath the way you do when you open a message from a person you love and fear, shallow first, then deep, when the words prove gentle. You place your mug in the sink not because you are tidy, but because action sometimes reassures. You ask yourself the hard question with a soft tone. If they are speaking, what are you willing to hear that might change you? The answer does not arrive. Answers, you're learning, ride currents. They prefer a long trip. Sitting now by the window again, you listen to the rain taper and the city switch to its pre-dawn script. Somewhere, a bakery starts, and flour enters the air like the promise of a small, honest future. That's your life close to home detail for this chapter. The knowledge that by 7 a.m. there will be bread, and bread will still be good. In a world rewriting its deep grammar, bread remains a thesis on kindness. You smile because sometimes survival is a pastry. On another coast, a different lab runs the pulses through an algorithm trained on everything from Morse to whale to modem handshakes. The output isn't a translation so much as a gesture toward one, a pattern of repeated openers that any human would call greetings if they were not professionally prohibited from using endearing language about data. The technician, whose day job is to mistrust, lets herself feel it anyway. She types in the log. Sequence exhibits salutation-like structure. Then she texts her sister. They're saying hi. The duality of that action pleases you more than it should. You tilt your head because your body has learned to listen with the bones behind your ears, like a whale wearing headphones. The pulses, real or imagined, tap the cupboard doors. You give the apartment a half-whispered update, as if to a friend arriving late to a movie. They're talking. The plant seems unfazed, but you decide it approves. Joke number 4 surfaces briefly. If you start spritzing the plant with salt water, will it become conversational? You decide against it because you respect boundaries and also your lease. A submersible miles down returns a sonar image that looks like a cathedral sank and decided to continue its services underwater. Arched shapes, repeated voids, a geometry that insists on having been arranged. It's not a city, you know that. It's likely a mineral formation shaped by currents and time, but the way sound echoes through it, That's design, whether by accident or intention. The pulses thread those halls like incense smoke in old air, and the stone replies with harmonics that fit the primary signal, as if they had practiced together long before humans discovered stone could be anything but stubborn. One of the researchers, the tired optimist with a coffee mug that says simply waves, sighs and says, "We're going to have to call this a language." The room resists. The word is heavy. It carries expectations, diplomacy, wars. Someone proposes proto-lexicon of structured signaling. Someone else counters with, "Let's just call it what it is." Silence votes. Language wins. They feel the click of a new frame settling into place. You feel it too, a subtle interior tectonic, a plate boundary accepting a visitor. You have a flicker of a thought you almost don't admit to yourself. What if they've been kinder with us than we deserve? You think of all the nets, the noise, the engines gnawing at the quiet, the way humanity has treated the ocean as a very large trash can that occasionally provides sushi. And yet the pulses are gentle, patient, the kind of generous that doesn't need you to apologize before it continues speaking. The realization feels like being forgiven by someone who never had to forgive you at all. The grad student overlays the pulses with a library of known human rhythms, drum patterns from a dozen cultures, ceremonial beats, long-step dances. In the overlay, something uncanny happens. Certain human patterns resonate with the deep signals in a way a poet would call kinship, and a physicist would call constructive interference. Your spine learns a new way to pay attention. You tap the windowsill twice, then 3 times, then 5. A silly homage that nevertheless makes you feel included. Joke number 5 arrives late but enthusiastic. If the ocean drops an album, you hope it's available on streaming because your record player does not appreciate humidity. You stand and walk to the mirror because there's a thought you need to check against your face. You don't look different, which is both a relief and a disappointment. The thought persists anyway. The world is bigger than your favorite emotion. The pulses do not care if you are anxious or well-rested or behind on your deadlines. They care that you are capable of listening across the species line, across the domain line, across the sky. You nod at your reflection like 2 conspirators agreeing to carry a fragile object between them. Outside, the first birds decide the light is sufficient to justify their entire personalities. Their chatter seems hysterically fast given what you've been hearing in the lower registers all night. You imagine translating whale to sparrow and feeling like someone changed the playback speed. It's adorable, the way the world layers languages like that. Deep bass, mid-range human chatter, treble birds, static of rain, the occasional siren like an oboe player who didn't get the memo. You feel held in a score big enough to include you and not worry about you at all. At the lab, the senior researcher drafts a short note for colleagues around the world. It is almost offensively calm, the way high-level notes always are when they describe doors opening that were previously walls. We report the detection of structured basin-scale infrasonic pulse trains with stable harmonic series and non-random interpulse intervals, it reads. A footnote suggests multimodal expression in plankton patterns. He leaves out the part about how his chest went warm the first time he heard it, how he thought briefly of his mother humming while folding towels, how everything complicated about Earth narrowed to one precise thought. We are being addressed. You rinse your coffee mug, decide it's wiser to rest than to refresh your newsfeed, and let your eyelids drop in a room that feels briefly like a cabin, the city a ship. As you drift, you carry with you the small fear of empty hallways. You always will, but it is flanked now by a larger companion. the understanding that you are not the only awake thing in the dark. The thought does not make you less alone. It changes the ancestry of the loneliness. You belong to a species that might be hearing a sentence addressed to an ocean, and you have the privilege of knowing it. That is not nothing. In fact, it is the sort of not nothing that redeems several Tuesdays in advance. Right before you sleep, another question pads barefoot into your mind and sits on the edge of your bed like a worried relative. Have you ever imagined your voice being so long that mountains get to finish hearing it? It's absurd and beautiful and exactly the kind of question you will answer only by living. The pulses keep counting. The salt keeps remembering. And you, small and exactly the right size, fall into a rest that feels like punctuation in a language you are finally learning to read. You dream of water before you even open your eyes. It isn't violent, not one of those drowning dreams that claw you awake gasping, but something slower, the kind of dream where you become the current. You slide through trenches like silk through fingers, brushing past thermal vents that shimmer like city lights. Shapes drift beside you, immense, unhurried, glowing like slow thoughts. You realize they're singing, but the sound doesn't reach your ears. It enters through your bones. Then a strange awareness curls inside the dream. You're being watched, but not the frightening kind of watched. More like a teacher leaning over your shoulder while you draw, letting you know the page matters. You wake up to daylight. It's a gray, polite kind of morning, the kind that forgets to tell the sun what time it is. You lie there a moment longer, tracing the dream's residue through your veins. The rhythm you heard still hums under your pulse, or maybe your pulse learned to hum it. Hard to tell which way the learning goes. Your phone glows with the usual parade of notifications: weather, news, a message from a friend saying, "Did you see the ocean thing?" You scroll half-heartedly until a headline catches your eye. Whales in the Pacific display unprecedented synchronization. Researchers baffled. You don't click it right away. You just stare at the words, feeling the hush between syllables, like the pause before a choir begins. When you finally tap the link, the article spills out in the calm excitement of scientific understatement. Multiple pods across thousands of miles, surfacing and diving in perfect rhythm, their calls converging into one shared frequency. The journalists, bless them, are careful not to use the word communication, but every sentence smells like it. You set the phone down. For a long time, you just listen. Not to the city, not even to the rain-damp street outside, but to your own breath. It sounds different today, more deliberate, as if you're keeping time with something vast. Out at sea, a vessel named Aquaria drifts above the continental shelf. Its instruments are old but loyal. Aboard, a crew of 6 marine biologists eats toast that tastes faintly of salt, even though the butter comes from a cooler. They've been tracking whales for years, but nothing like this. Every pod, from the Pacific archipelagos to the polar fronts, has fallen into the same pulse pattern: 5 tones, pause, 3, pause, 5. When amplified, it sounds like thunder practicing to whisper. A graduate intern records the sounds, unaware that her microphone is also catching faint harmonics coming not from above, but from below, far below. The computer translates it into graphs, spiking gently in tempo with the comet's changing velocity. 3i Atlas is getting closer. The ship's captain, an old man whose laugh could polish brass, mutters about tides and omens. He's not a superstitious man, except for every day of his life. "I've seen squids the size of trucks," he says, tapping his pipe against the rail. "But this This feels like the water's expecting something. The youngest on deck, hair whipped wild by sea spray, just nods. Expecting what? She asks. He doesn't answer. He doesn't have to. The sea answers for him, a deep vibration, low enough to rattle mugs on the table below deck. No one calls it an earthquake. It feels more like a sigh. You step into your kitchen. The day smells faintly metallic, the way air smells when weather can't decide which side it's on. You pour cereal, forget the milk, and scroll back to that article. The video autoplay starts without asking permission, a drone shot of whales moving like planets in orbit. You tilt the screen. The rhythm matches the pulse that haunted your dream. Coincidence? Your brain loves that word. It's tidy, easy to file, but something deep in your stomach, maybe the same ancient instinct that flinches at thunder, disagrees. The article mentions acoustic anomalies in coastal recordings, a phrase that sounds harmless until you realize it means no one knows what's talking. A notification blinks from a science forum. Sonar interference mapped in the Mariana region. Possible geological resonance. You click through, but the data doesn't read like geology. It reads like music. You find yourself thinking about the sound of loneliness, that soft electric buzz of an empty apartment, the way it fills the silence just enough to remind you you're still here. Maybe the planet feels that too. Maybe the ocean's loneliness just found a reply. In the Pacific, the Aquaria's data uplink crackles. A harmonic wave passes through the network. For a fraction of a second, every buoy connected to the global oceanic grid emits the same tone, a clean, clear D-flat. It lasts only a breath, long enough for the crew to stop, cups midair, spoons hovering like question marks. Then it's gone. But far below, where light has never met itself, bioluminescent plankton ignite like constellations in formation. From above, satellites capture the faint shimmer, a swirling geometry eerily resembling the 3I Atlas orbital path. You'd think it was random, but you've seen this shape before. It's the same spiral printed in the lab data last night. The same sequence in the sonar patterns, and, if you're being honest, the same curve you traced in condensation on your window while daydreaming about the comet. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's choreography. Either way, it's intentional. You remember reading once that dolphins can recognize themselves in mirrors. Humanity took that as a sign of intelligence. But maybe it's the mirror itself that's important. The idea that reflection can be recognition. What if the ocean just found its own mirror in the sky? You sip your now soggy cereal and smile at the absurdity, yet the thought won't leave. There's something thrilling about the possibility that two immensities, space and sea, could finally see each other after all this time. A deep-sea camera records footage of something that doesn't fit into its logbook. A mass of light moves below the trench, not rising, not falling, just expanding, pulsing in time with the 3I Atlas data. A researcher on deck mutters, "That's not thermal vent output." His colleague leans closer, voice trembling. "It's communication." They don't publish the footage. Not yet. They don't even share it outside the crew. Some truths are too big to belong to headlines. Back in your apartment, you go about the rituals of pretending life is normal. You check emails, brush teeth, glance at the mirror. But your reflection lingers half a second too long. Not lag, just hesitation. As if something on the other side is thinking about responding. You chuckle softly, muttering, "Get a grip." Still, you can't help leaning closer just to be sure. Your breath fogs the glass. A ripple of condensation spreads outward like a ripple on water. You pull back quickly. The air feels heavy again, the same atmospheric weight that came before the comet was first visible. A tiny piece of trivia surfaces in your mind like a stray bubble. The human body contains about the same ratio of salt water as the ocean, 96%. You think about that and shiver. Maybe that's why you've been feeling all this. The same tide, but inside you. You glance out the window. The comet is brighter now, visible even through the morning haze. It looks calm, deliberate, as if aware of its own audience. Somewhere a scientist will soon note that 3I Atlas's trajectory has shifted by a fraction of a degree, a deviation consistent with small bursts of internal propulsion, like microjets. But they won't mention that the bursts occur in the exact same rhythm as the oceanic pulses. For now it's just you and the quiet and that streak of light pretending to be innocent. There's a word you remember from a philosophy book, anamnesis, the act of remembering something you never learned, only rediscovered. Maybe that's what Earth is doing now. You stand by the window, watching clouds move like waves across the sky, and realize how strange it is that we call both the sea and the stars depths. The universe above and the abyss below, two infinities separated only by a thin strip of air where we keep our fragile homes. If you press your ear against the silence hard enough, you swear you can hear the pulse again. Slower now, more like a heartbeat trying not to startle you. You whisper, half a prayer, half a dare. Are you listening? The wind outside stirs, a low moan through the eaves. Somewhere beneath the Pacific, an echo stirs too, low and steady. Yes. The sound isn't a word, but it's enough. Enough to make you lean closer to the window, eyes wide, whispering to no one and everyone. Then let's begin. You don't remember sitting down, but somehow you're at your desk again. Laptop screen glowing like a small square of moonlight. The hum of the world outside feels different tonight. The sort of hush that hangs before someone says something important. You scroll through the open tabs, a web of news, research snippets, and blurry screenshots. Every story hums with the same undertone. Data. Something in the data. Astronomers, data analysts, AI pattern modelers. They all say it the same way. We found something strange. Not dramatic, not loud. The language of discovery is quiet when it's real. You open one of the published reports, full of graphs you only half understand. There, in the tail of 3I Atlas, embedded within particle telemetry, are repeating numerical clusters, prime intervals that don't belong to random motion. They repeat like rhythm, like music too patient for human ears. You read a comment below the article. It's not just math, it's structure. Another says, maybe it's nothing. But nothing doesn't hum in symmetrical ratios. You sip tea that's gone cold. Its bitterness keeps you tethered to small reality. Outside, the sky is iron gray, clouds glowing faintly where 3I Atlas slices through them. You tell yourself you'll stop checking, stop refreshing, but curiosity is its own kind of tide. Gentle, relentless, pulling you back every time. Down below, in the quiet womb of the ocean, machines record something the human eye can't see. Energy signatures, flickering like coded light. It isn't random interference. The pattern in the comet's plasma tail is mirrored in faint electrical discharges beneath the surface of the Pacific. Same spacing, same rhythm, the same song. You lean closer to the screen, scrolling through lines of numbers that might as well be poetry. Each repetition feels deliberate, each interval a heartbeat. For a moment, You imagine that if you read long enough, if you squint just right, the data will start whispering words. At an observatory high in the Atacama Desert, a scientist stares at a composite image of Three-Eye Atlas's tail. The particle stream should be chaotic, a fog of dust. But instead, she sees symmetry, thin tendrils forming hexagonal clusters, glowing faintly in organized bloom. She hesitates, saving the image twice, naming one file atlastail.jpg, and the second, impulsively, message1.jpg. Later, when she zooms closer, she notices that the brightness fluctuates in repeating intervals of 2.1 seconds. It's almost absurdly musical, like breath. In another part of the world, a marine technician compares two sound patterns, the comet's plasma variations and oceanic sonar pulses. They overlap perfectly when slowed to human scale. The realization travels slowly, like cold spreading through metal. Something above and something below are speaking the same language. You think of it again, that phrase the scientists avoid saying aloud, alien intelligence. It's too heavy for their mouths, too early for their careers. But in the soft light of your apartment, you whisper it anyway. It doesn't sound frightening. It sounds inevitable. What if intelligence didn't arrive from the stars, but drifted between them, a consciousness migrating like plankton, seeding awareness where it lands? You picture Three-Eye Atlas not as a rock or machine, but as something alive in a way you don't have vocabulary for, neither organism nor artifact, but a thought made physical. And maybe the ocean recognizes it because they've met before, long before humans learned to name comets or oceans at all. It's strange how wonder and fear share the same heartbeat. You feel it now, sitting there, the tight, thrilling pressure in your chest that asks whether the world might be far more awake than you ever imagined. There's a knock of thunder in the distance, soft and lazy, as if the sky clears its throat. Rain follows, slow and deliberate. Each drop hits the window in rhythm. 5, pause, 3, pause, 5. You close your eyes and try not to notice the coincidence, but your body already has. You're breathing with it. You wonder quietly how long the ocean has been waiting for its sky to answer. In the deep, amid black coral and silent dunes of silt, a probe's camera captures a flicker, geometric light rippling across the seafloor. It looks like phosphorescent sand caught in slow motion, forming circles, then breaking apart. The pattern repeats every 8 minutes with eerie precision. The transmission is delayed by hours before reaching the surface, and by then, most of the world is asleep. Only one young technician is still awake to see it. He watches the footage twice, then 3 times, until the realization dawns. The luminous shapes below are the same structures forming in the comet's tail above. Sky and sea are mirroring each other, communicating through frequency, through light. He sends the clip to his supervisor, who replies only, "Go get some rest." But rest won't come easily anymore. You think of that, the impossible symmetry between above and below, and the word that drifts through your mind isn't fear or even awe. It's recognition, as if two beings long separated are finding each other again, their voices trembling through the void between worlds. You feel it too, that strange pulse inside you, like your blood has picked up a new rhythm. You place your palm against the cool glass of the window and swear you feel a faint vibration there. On the internet, conspiracy threads blossom overnight. Three-Eye Atlas carrying alien code, Ocean frequencies mimic comet signals. The planet is waking up. You should laugh, and part of you does. But somewhere deeper, you're not laughing. You think of how many myths begin this way. How gods were once simply misunderstood guests from elsewhere. Maybe we've never stopped being hosts to mysteries we can't decode. A simple, grounding fact comes to you. Cats can recognize their names but often choose not to respond. Maybe the ocean's been doing the same thing, listening politely until something finally called it by name. By evening, the rain has stopped, and the world smells new, raw, rinsed clean. The comet is visible even before dusk now, its tail stretched like a thought unraveling across the heavens. You stand at your window, the room lit only by that celestial glow, and you whisper to the dark, "We see you." The reflection in the glass seems to shift, just slightly. Maybe it's the light, maybe it's your tired eyes, or maybe it's something in the ocean's endless memory stirring in reply. You can almost hear the rhythm again, faint, patient, like breathing shared between worlds. You exhale, slow, matching it, until your own heartbeat and the pulse of the unknown fall into sync. The world feels quieter, not empty, but full. Alive in a way it never was before. And though you can't prove anything yet, you know the truth isn't coming from the telescope data or the sonar readings. It's coming from somewhere older, deeper, a story that began long before humanity arrived to listen. Tonight, the universe hums like a secret rediscovered, and the ocean, faithful and waiting, hums back. You are a passenger in a darkness so complete it feels polite. The submersible sphere curls around you like a glass eyelid. The outside world a thick velvet quiet, laced with instrument chatter. You're not supposed to be here, not officially, but the pilot said your kind of listening might be useful, and you said yes before the fearful part of you could file its objections in triplicate. Now the ocean is a room without corners, and the descent numbers on the console tick down through meters like a bedtime countdown. 11,000 meters is a phrase that should be said softly, like a name in a chapel. You're not there yet. The hull creaks in long, whale-like vowels when the pressure remembers to introduce itself. In the dim cabin, the pilot's hands rest on joysticks as if they were sleeping animals that might wake. She doesn't talk much. When she does, it's with the steady voice of someone who knows that sound is also scaffolding. "Passing 7,200, she murmurs. Then, thermocline ahead. The readouts flicker. The water's temperature layers like sheets pulled up to a chin. You will not admit you are afraid of deep places. You will, however, acknowledge that your body is currently practicing the ancient art of smallness. Shoulders tucked, breath shallow, heartbeat careful. This isn't the movie kind of fear. It's the motel at 3 a.m. kind, where the ice machine down the hall becomes an opera about solitude. You sip from a flexible pouch of water because you've seen astronauts do it, and because your mouth has mistaken curiosity for desert. Joke number 1 arrives to steady your hands. If you drop the pouch, does it become a tiny jellyfish? No, but your brain enjoys the visual. The exterior lights throw modest cones of brightness into the dark. Particles drift past like fine snow that forgot to be cold. At this depth, time feels less like a line and more like a hum you can sit inside. The sub's forward camera pushes its image to a small dome of screen, grayscale and grain, occasional ghost shapes of creatures built from thread and patience. A bristle of bioluminescence flares, then dims, as if the ocean tried to wink, but remembered it has no eyelids. The pilot taps a dial. Approaching the trench wall. Her voice carries the same respect you use when approaching a sleeping relative you adore. On sonar, the cliff appears not as a line, but as a silence, a place where echoes go to think. The display shows a vertical plane so vast it forgets how to be metaphor, and you feel that old, childlike dread of being the last person awake in a dark house. What if the house breathes? What if it breathes you in? A small life close to home fact intrudes, grounding as a fingertip. You left a frozen loaf of bread on the counter. If the power blips, you'll return to a doughy crime scene. The thought makes you smile, wonky and human. You are an animal who worries about bread while descending into a mile of memory. This pleases you more than it should. At 9,800 meters, the sub's nose lamp catches a drift of silt that behaves oddly, curling in an inward spiral, as if the light itself has weight and is stirring the water. Refractive eddies, the pilot says, but her brow tightens, betraying the word maybe. She nudges the thrusters. The sub moves like a patient pen stroke along the trench's edge. Then something happens that your mind first files under optical illusion and then refuses to file at all. The cone of light doesn't spread outward into the dark. It narrows, a funnel turned the wrong way. Where the beam meets the water, the brightness bends back toward you, poured from the edges into a thin blade running straight down the center, as if the ocean had decided to teach light a new grammar. The pilot inhales. That's backwards. Backwards how? You whisper, because whispering feels like good manners in the presence of physics misbehaving. Index gradient would pull light to the side. This is returning it. She frowns, then adjusts exposure. The camera compensates, and the scene resolves. Not brighter, not clearer, but truer, like a lens finally admitting which eye it prefers. What the beam reveals is not a wall and not a floor, but a plane that behaves like both. It's not reflective in the mirror sense. There's no tidy image bouncing back. And yet the light that should scatter instead arranges itself into a lattice of faint points. They shimmer in positional stubbornness, holding their places even as the sub shifts. At first they mean nothing, a pretty snow of luminous dust. Then the pattern rotates in your head without moving at all, the way a familiar face appears from the chaos of a crowd. You know those lights. You've watched them through your window for nights now, traced them between clouds, tried to pretend you did not know their names. Orion's belt, askew. The arc of Scorpius, softened. The faint exact triangle of summer. The map on the trench wall is the sky, but slightly wrong. Not a flat reflection, more like a memory of the sky laid down in a different density. Have you ever imagined holding the night in a bowl and tilting it until the stars settle into a new arrangement that still insists on being true? Constellations, you breathe. But underwater. The pilot doesn't answer right away. She flicks the lights off, then on, as if to ask the ocean a polite follow-up. The lattice persists when the beams die, not by glowing, but by stealing glow from elsewhere, a negative brightness as convincing as hunger. It's bending ambient photons, she says slowly, or guiding them, she swallows. Or it's not optics at all. The sub's laser altimeter pings the plane and gets nonsense, distances that jitter between meters and kilometers. The sonar throws a tantrum and draws a hole where a wall should be. The pilot tries a different frequency. The plane answers with a small, patient flicker at the location of Vega, as if saying, "Hello, we saw you notice." Your scalp tightens in that mammalian way it does when an empty room answers you back. The fear is not claws and teeth. It's the soft terror of being the one who turned around last on a staircase and discovered the house is listening. You hold steady. You ask the question the night has smuggled into your mouth. What are you willing to believe when your tools become shy? Joke number 2, surfaces with apologetic timing. Do trench mirrors count as 7 years good luck if they show you a better sky? It's a flimsy raft of humor in big water, but it floats, and you stand on it long enough to breathe. The pilot edges the sub closer. The lattice sharpens, star to star, until the knot constellation resolves into a structure of spacing, not just positions but relationships. Angles flex minutely, as if being tuned. The pattern is not the sky of this moment. It is a sky from elsewhere, or elsewhen. 3 Atlas's approach vector appears as a thin, deliberate thread weaving through the points, a path you've seen in diagrams, now drawn by the abyss. You cannot think of a kinder word than welcome. Something touches the hull, not a knock, not a scrape. More like the sensation you get when an elevator stops at the right floor and the cables relax. The gauges show a hairline change in pressure, then a ripple in the surrounding salinity, small and impossible to beweather. Around the sub, tiny creatures blink in lambent sympathy, and you realize with a child's relief that you are not alone in your seeing. The pilot opens a narrow band channel and broadcasts a simple tone sequence. The ocean's new counting, 235. The lattice responds. Vega brightens. Then a faint point where your mind recognizes Deneb winks in agreement. The geometry ripples outward across the plane like a stone thrown into space. You don't speak. You do not have the right words, and the wrong ones would be loud. A curiosity you didn't authorize steps forward inside you. Have you ever thought of mirrors not as copies, but as doors that only open when you stop asking them to be exact? The trench's plane is not mimicking the sky. It is remembering it differently, folding the night into a grammar water can hold. A fish shaped like a line break drifts through the field. For a moment its outline splits and stitches itself, as if the mirror must choose where to permit bodies. The fish is unbothered. You take notes no one will read except you later, when you need proof that your mind didn't invent the church where photons bowed. The pilot's voice softens. We should mark and ascend. She doesn't want to. Neither do you. The sub hums its ascent anyway, thrusters offering the courtesy of departure. As you rise, the lattice dims not in defeat, but in rehearsal, as if practicing for an audience not yet seated. The last point to fade holds position where 3I Atlas will be when night returns topside. It stays a second longer than science would prefer, the ocean's version of a wave goodbye. On the way up, the fear loosens its belt. Your body remembers land, stairs, bread. You think of your apartment's rotor, that little red LED that blinks like a lonely lighthouse when the internet sleeps. You feel a tenderness toward all the small lights we invent to keep the dark company while it waits for us to be brave. Back in the world of hallways and kettles, you will tell no one everything. You will say light bending and odd optics and needs review. You will not say mirror, not yet. But you will stand at your window tonight and search the sky for the pattern you saw below, and when you find it, you will ask the softest dangerous question. If they can show us the stars from the bottom of the sea, what else have they been saving to show us when we finally asked? The pilot logs the coordinates, the sublevels. Somewhere above, weather rearranges its pockets. Somewhere below, a plane of knot light keeps the memory of constellations warm, like a hand over a candle's last inch of heat. You touch the viewport with your fingertips, a gesture both foolish and devout. The glass is cold. Your skin is warm. Between them, a world that for a moment allowed you to see it the way it sees itself. Or gradually let the mythic tone begin to emerge, more whispers of ancient memory and folklore, while still maintaining the cinematic calm and second-person narration. It'll affect how the forgotten pact feels, either like scientific discovery or like a deep, mythic remembering beneath the world. You are back on land, though it takes most of a day before your body believes it. Floors are too still after the ocean. They forget to breathe with you. You walk carefully across them, expecting the tilt and hush of waves that never come. The sound of the city seems overexposed. Tires hiss, voices overlap, lights hum. Everything wants to be louder than the quiet you brought home from the trench. You don't unpack right away. The suitcase stays by the door like a shy animal. Instead, you shower, letting hot water disguise itself as rain. Steam climbs the mirror until your reflection is only suggestion, and you feel strangely relieved not to have to meet your own eyes. When the fog clears, you half expect to see the lattice of undersea stars behind you, but there's only tile and the faint outline of your shoulders. The news cycle has already digested the expedition. Headlines speak in tidy fonts. Optical distortion in Mariana Trench explained. Scientists investigate sonar glitch. No evidence of extraterrestrial source. The relief in their denial is almost affectionate. The ocean's mystery has been translated into paperwork. You know the tone. It's the same tone people use when comforting a child after a nightmare. It's nothing. Go back to sleep. But you didn't have a nightmare. You had a memory. For days, your nights are soft-edged and full of half-sound. You sleep with a window cracked to let in the sea smell that doesn't actually reach this far inland. The hum you once thought belonged to the refrigerator comes and goes in a rhythm too slow for appliances. In the dream hours, when the line between hearing and remembering smudges, you catch fragments, tones that lean together like faces in conversation, the low chorus of something vast, remembering how to speak. You start walking at dusk. It's easier to listen when the world is less opinionated. Down at the harbor, boats groan in their slips, masts clicking soft percussion. The tide makes a small argument with the breakwater and then forgives it. You lean on the railing and breathe. The water smells metallic tonight, old coins and kelp. Beneath the smell is something colder, not unpleasant, just unfamiliar, like the air in a cathedral that hasn't opened its doors in 100 years. A seal surfaces a few meters out, watching you with eyes that look like they've already read your thoughts. You almost say hello, but the animal dives before your voice finds courage. The ripples it leaves behind form a pattern that you can't unsee. Circles within circles, the same spacing as the pulses you heard on the descent. You trace them in the air with one finger. They fade, but the gesture stays, an invisible compass turning under your skin. Later, in bed, you think of something the pilot said during the ascent. You'd almost missed it under the hum of the instruments. "Maybe it isn't new," she murmured, eyes on the console. "Maybe we just forgot where to listen." The phrase sits with you now, patient and heavy, forgotten, not undiscovered. That difference feels important. You dig into old archives, late-night rabbit holes that taste like dust and curiosity. Myths of sea people and sky fires, of beings who crossed between elements to renew the world. Polynesian songs that describe lights, speaking to the water. Arctic carvings showing comets as fish with burning tails. The further back you read, the more the stories overlap, as if separated cultures were different mouths telling the same memory. You pause at a line from a half-translated legend of the Haida. When the sky descends, the ocean will remember its promise. You stare at the words until they start to feel like coordinates, a promise between what and what. You look again at the reports from the Equaria, at your own notes full of spirals and stars. Somewhere in the tangle of numbers is that quiet word, pact. You don't know its terms. You suspect you are not supposed to. Outside, rain starts again, soft as breath on glass. You turn off the lamp. The room becomes a small planet, your heartbeat the only moon. In that calm, the phrase from the legend returns. The ocean will remember. You whisper it once, testing its weight in the air. The syllables sound older than your mouth. In the dark, something gentle happens. Not sight, not sound, more like atmosphere leaning closer. The walls feel farther away, the ceiling taller. You imagine the deep beneath you, not as threat, but as continuity. You are a ripple sitting on top of another ripple that never stopped moving. Your fear of being alone softens at the edges. Alone is still here, but it has been joined by company you can't name. It feels less like solitude and more like participation. Somewhere under miles of pressure, something remembers you back. You think of the bread you left thawing days ago, now baked and half-eaten, the crust still sweet with the taste of patience. You think of all the small domestic acts, watering a plant, straightening a frame, feeding a cat, that might be rituals in disguise, each one a way of keeping balance with a world that listens. The next morning, you find yourself writing without planning to. The words aren't dramatic, just a list of sensations. Light bends, salt hums, the sea breathes first. You fold the page and slip it into your pocket before leaving the apartment. It feels less like taking notes and more like carrying a fragment of translation. At the harbor again, dawn wears the color of pewter. A fishing boat motors out, its wake trailing ribbons of foam that gleam faintly pink where sunlight almost touches them. The gulls argue, as they always do, unaware of packs and comets. You envy them briefly, then smile. Not knowing is its own form of grace. You stay until the boat is a dot, until the tide reverses direction, until you can't tell whether the sea is rising or the sky is lowering to meet it. And in that still, deliberate hour, you finally understand the simplest truth of all this. Nothing has arrived. Nothing has invaded. The connection was always there, patient as tide. You just learned how to overhear it again. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, Three-Eye Atlas turns imperceptibly, its tail now fainter in daylight. Somewhere beneath your feet, an unseen current matches its tempo, a long inhale waiting for its echo. Between them stands you, listening, breathing, remembering a story that might be older than both. You whisper just to test the thought. Maybe this is the promise. The water answers with silence, the generous kind that means yes. You descend again, the way a thought returns when you've left the room and remembered what you meant to say. Different vessel, different day, same drowned cathedral of pressure. The pilot from before isn't on this run. Today it's a hushed trio, pilot, engineer, you, each of you carrying a small superstition tucked in a pocket like a mint. The engineer taps the same spot on the bulkhead for luck. You lay a palm on the viewport as if greeting an old window. The pilot hums what could be nothing or could be a scale. 11,000 meters is not a number. It's a posture the world asks you to adopt. The sphere creaks, and the creak feels courteous, like wood in a winter house saying, Yes, I still remember how to hold you. The descent is a long exhale. Past the place where daylight gives up the argument. Past the cloud of organisms that pretend to be stars and do a better job of it than any LED. Past the unphotographable sensation of weight that isn't gravity, but attention. You practice the ritual that steadies you. Count your breaths to 4, then 5, then 8. Somewhere in that counting, fear makes itself small enough to slip into your shoe and ride along as a pebble instead of a storm. A familiar question wanders in anyway. If something answers, will you know what to do? And sits down politely beside the instruments. You don't answer. You unspool the cable of listening instead. The pilot holds the sub just shy of the trench wall. Lights on, then a notch down, then off. Blackness becomes the dominant language, and the sub replies with sonar, soft pings spaced like careful footfalls in a sleeping house. The returns paint absence, the way radar paints weather, a map of where your sound has not been allowed to continue, a whole topography of no. Then the absence answers. It begins like a smudge on the graph, a slight bloom where the algorithm expects a clean return. The engineer leans closer, his breath a small weather system on the glass of the display. The smudge firms into timing. 3 pulses, a long rest. 2. It's not an echo. It's wrong for an echo. The delays are too knowing. He speaks very quietly, the way you do when a sleeping child changes its breathing pattern and you aren't sure if you caused it. We didn't send that. The pilot glances at you. Transmit simple. She means keep it to numbers, to intervals, to primate honesty. You key in the tone sequence that became a kind of hello among the team. 2, 3, 5. Pause. 2. The sub-speaker sings it into the dark. The hull's skin registers the smallest tap, sensation masquerading as sound, like rain beginning on a tent. The graph answers with the same tones but backwards in time, as if replayed from the end of a hallway you haven't walked yet. You try not to laugh from nerves. Joke number 1 surfaces, shy and sincere. Apparently the abyss is a fan of remixes. The engineer's mouth does the smallest mutiny of a grin. Then the return blooms into harmony, overtones stacking like scaffolding laid by careful hands. It's your pattern, but not just mirrored. It's braided with something older, as if the trench kept an attic's worth of songs and chose one that fits around you the way a river fits around a stone. The pilot switches from active to passive listening, like a person shelving their voice in order to hear the undertone of a room. The dark replies with infrasonics you don't hear so much as admit into your bones. The notes are long enough to use as a walkway. You step onto them without moving. Marking, the engineer says, which is science for remember this. Outside the viewport, an animal the size of a sleep, small, luminous, draws cursive in the water with its body. The script threads the sonar's beat. You think of writing with a sparkler at summer's edge and realize the motions don't fade here. They join a larger sentence. Have you ever imagined listening to a place until it listens back to you as if you were a place? 2. The sequence shifts. Pings become phrases. The spectrogram lifts its skirt of color and reveals a pattern you recognize. The Fibonacci pacing you've watched spill from 3-eye Atlas's tail and ripple through plankton blooms. Only now, an extra measure appears, an insertion that sits between 5 and 8, like a breath a singer takes to keep the line unbroken. The engineer mutters a number you don't catch. The pilot's hand hovers over controls without touching them, a reverence you've seen once before in a chapel. You send another hello, 5-tone ladder, pause, down step, and the return arrives not as copy, but as consent. It weaves your tones into its longer ones and, impossibly, threads in the three-note tick the pilot once used to calibrate the sub on the surface. You never transmitted that below. The water remembers what it overheard when you thought you were alone. The primitive fear, the motel corridor at 3 a.m. fear, arrives to do its job. It would like to know who else has the key to your hallway. You let it sit on the console beside the other question. You do not ask it to leave. You simply give it company by placing your hand over your own pulse until both of you feel counted. The pilot nods toward the hull. Feel that? You do, a slow wash of pressure cycling, not the indiscriminate shove of a distant quake, but a patterned kneading, as if a tide were practicing to be a hand. The readouts show pendulum swings in salinity so small a normal day would bury them in noise. Today they ride wake behind the tones, punctuation in salt. Something bright touches the edge of vision, a seam of almost light running along water like a hairline crack in glass. The lattice from before returns, but altered. Not a flat sky map now, a tilted plane, flexing as if to match the angle of an inbound path. Points brighten and dim to the rhythm of the trench's reply. You know the names your species gave those points, but here they feel like their own names finally spoken by themselves. The engineer whispers, 2 sources. He means the pattern is not just local. It includes a higher frequency embroidery riding in from above, red shifted by water, slowed by patience. 3i Atlas is close enough now that its microbursts, those deliberate puffs you haven't yet admitted are propulsion, arrive as ticks inside the deep's longer vowels. The duet is literal. You transmit a last sequence, your shortest hello, the one you can bear to have misunderstood without breaking. The return this time is unmistakable. It uses your timing, it includes the calibration tick, and at the end, it leaves a rest exactly the length of the breath you took before pressing send. You did not mean to become part of the instrument, but respiration is a generous secret. Everything that hears you well enough will borrow it. Joke number 2 rises to keep you human. If this is a conversation, do we tip? The pilot's eyes crinkle. Even the engineer's shoulders lower a fraction, as if laughter could float in brine. Ascending, the pilot says at last, not because the moment is finished, but because humans are. She feathers the thrusters and the sub obeys, regretfully polite. As you lift, the lattice leans after you like a page in wind, then settles, the way a face softens when a smile is private and only meant for the person who has already left. On the way up you log something you will redact later. They replied with us inside the answer. You add the domestic fact that anchors you. Tonight you'll make soup, the kind that tastes better the second day because you suddenly want food that knows how to deepen by waiting. You add a question you don't know how to share yet. What pact requires a breath held this long, and, because curiosity is a candle you refuse to extinguish, you add one more small imagining. Have you ever thought the Marianas pressure might be embrace? When you finally remember to move at the ocean's speed? Near the thermocline, the water warms around you with all the drama of a blanket being unfolded in the next room. The pilot exhales through a smile that doesn't try to be brave. It simply is. The engineer taps the bulkhead again, new ritual on top of old. You press fingers to the viewport. The glass is cool. Your fingertips are warmer than you thought. Between them, a world that, for a handful of tones, borrowed your breath and returned it tuned. The surface receives you with its usual indifference that feels like mercy. Sky is sky again, which is to say, it's pretending not to be inside the ocean's memory. On deck, the air tastes like metal and wind, and you love it with the ridiculous devotion we give to things that almost lost us. You will go home to floors that forget to sway, to a plant that needs water and will forgive you, to a kettle that squeals as if auditioning for oboe. You will sleep, and just before you do, alone but not in your room, a little fear will pad along the hallway to keep you honest, and you'll let it curl up at the foot of the bed because even fear deserves company. As if to confirm the day, your phone will buzz with a message from nobody you know, a satellite image of plankton drawing a line you've already traced with sound. And you'll think, not with triumph, not even with relief, but with the kind of recognition that holds without gripping, they answered where we could feel it. The night after the descent is heavy with a strange metallic stillness. Clouds move like slow ink over the ocean, and the air hums faintly, the way speakers do when plugged in but not yet singing. You lie awake in your small apartment, lights dimmed. The city beyond your window humming its mechanical lullaby. The noise doesn't bother you anymore. It feels almost comforting, like a heartbeat you share with every other restless thing in the world. You drift between waking and something quieter, your thoughts slipping like minnows. Every time you close your eyes, you see the plane of light again, the inverted sky glowing beneath miles of pressure, not as a vision, not as memory, but as an echo that refuses to fade. You try not to name what you saw. Naming makes things smaller. The clock blinks 2:17 a.m. when the first vibration comes. Subtle at first. Your glass of water trembles, a gentle ripple that catches the faint reflection of city light. The floor hums, then it stops. The kind of silence that follows feels alive, like someone holding their breath in the dark. It isn't fear that fills you this time, it's awareness. The same way your skin prickles before a storm. You sit up, heartbeat matching the pulse of something vast beneath your feet. Somewhere out there, the ocean is breathing differently. Thousands of miles away, deep sensors confirm it. Methane seeps along fault lines in rhythmic bursts, all synchronized across the globe. It shouldn't be possible. Different tectonic plates, different ecosystems, different temperatures, but somehow the oceans exhale together. Scientists call it coincident degassing events. They write papers, use words like resonance and cascading feedback loops. But when you listen to the recordings, raw, unfiltered, you hear something else. Not random burps of trapped gas, but a deep, steady rhythm, like the planet is clearing its throat. You take a walk before dawn, unable to stay still. The streets are washed clean by the tide's invisible breath. Each puddle mirrors a different patch of sky, orange sodium lamps, pale blue pre-morning, and the comet's thin streak still hanging low, refusing to leave. You pass the harbor. The smell of salt feels sharper tonight, like a word whispered too close to your ear. The water's surface is strangely calm. No ripples, no sound. Just a perfect dark mirror stretching out. You pause at the railing, resting your hands on cold metal, and for a moment, everything feels suspended. Then you feel it again. A low tremor rising through the soles of your shoes. Not the quick, nervous flutter of an earthquake. No. This is slower, almost kind. A long, drawn-out exhale from somewhere beneath. The sound isn't audible, but your body hears it anyway. You lean into it, the way one leans toward a familiar voice. Far below, where cameras cannot reach, the seafloor blooms with movement. Thermal vents release columns of light that pulse in unison, brighter, dimmer, brighter again. Around them, fields of bacteria and coral begin to sway in synchronized waves. Each pulse corresponds exactly to the comet's latest change in trajectory. Every time 3i Atlas adjusts its path, the planet responds. The world is breathing with it now. Later that morning, you sit in a cafe watching the horizon. The TV in the corner mutters about strange tidal reports, currents reversing briefly, plankton migration patterns altered, sensor anomalies. You smile faintly. To them, it's an anomaly. To you, it's conversation. You stir your tea absent-mindedly, and the spoon taps in rhythm with something you can't stop feeling. That same slow pulse that began in your chest, now everywhere, in the air conditioner's hum, in footsteps on the sidewalk, even in the distant drone of ships. A small fact crosses your mind like a lazy cloud. If the ocean released all its methane at once, the atmosphere would shimmer for weeks. You imagine that, Earth wrapped in a translucent halo, breathing light. It's beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. You take another sip. The tea's warmth steadies you. You tell yourself you're fine. You are. But the thought keeps looping. If the ocean has a pulse, what happens when it reaches its heartbeat's crescendo? That evening, scientists around the world hold emergency calls. It's all very professional, calm voices reading graphs. The methane bursts are harmless, they insist. Self-regulating system. But someone, one lone researcher, points out the timing again. The pulses line up precisely with 3i Atlas's orbital deceleration. It's too perfect to ignore. No one laughs this time, and somewhere, deep beneath their conference call, the ocean releases one final exhalation, long, low, reverent, the kind of sound that could be mistaken for prayer. You dream again that night. You're standing barefoot on the ocean floor, surrounded by soft blue glow. Fish drift by like thoughts, unbothered by your presence. The pressure doesn't crush you. It cradles you, like gravity in reverse. Above you, the comet glows brighter, its tail stretching down toward you, a thread of silver connecting sea and sky. The two lights meet, one from above, one from below, and for a breathless second, you see it, the symmetry, perfect and ancient, as if this was always meant to happen. When you wake, your pillow is damp with sweat, but your body feels lighter, as though something heavy has been drawn out. You sit up, heart steady, and whisper into the empty room, "I heard you." By sunrise, the world begins to notice. Weather stations record subtle fluctuations in air density. Barometers twitch without reason. In some coastal towns, fog rolls in patterns that look eerily like fingerprints. People film the ocean shimmering at night, the waves glowing softly as though illuminated from within. The videos go viral, of course. Bioluminescent bloom, say the captions. Alien invasion, say the comments. But you don't bother arguing. You know the truth doesn't care which story wins. What you feel is not invasion, it's remembrance. Something vast has begun to stir, not to destroy, but to awaken, and all across the planet, the oceans are breathing in time, the same rhythm thrumming quietly beneath your ribs. You lie back, eyes open to the dawn's pale light, and let the thought settle like a tide. Maybe this is what a planet feels like when it remembers it's alive. Morning arrives without ceremony. The light through your curtains looks tired, like it's traveled too far. You stay still for a while, half under the covers, listening. The city hasn't woken yet, Even the birds seem undecided. What you hear instead is the hum, faint, steady, and not quite external. It lives somewhere between the wall and your ribs. You don't rush to identify it. You've learned that naming too soon can shrink a mystery, so you breathe in sync with it instead, the way you might harmonize with a song you barely remember. The radio on the kitchen counter breaks the silence. Its voice is grainy, but the words catch your attention. Atmospheric anomalies recorded across multiple regions. Scientists cite interference patterns possibly linked to, then static, then a soft tone, 3 low pulses followed by 2 high. The announcer doesn't comment. He just keeps talking as if nothing happened. But you heard it. Everyone who's been listening closely enough did. You turn the volume down and let the hum return. By midday, the news cycle has decided what story to tell. Nothing unusual, minor interference from solar wind. You almost laugh. The denial has become predictable. Like an old reflex, the planet itself seems to have outgrown. Out the window, the world is wrapped in the muted glow of post-rain. Street puddles catch the gray sky like fragile mirrors. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the ocean keeps breathing. Each exhale now visible in small ways, mist over fields, salt in the wind, rain falling just a fraction heavier than it should. You decide to walk. It helps to be near water, even the kind that gathers in ditches and gutters. As you move, your footsteps align with a rhythm that's been building in your head. You realize it's everywhere, in the hum of power lines, in the pattern of passing cars, in the tiny pauses between heartbeats. The world has found a tempo, and it's carrying you with it. Have you ever noticed how crowds breathe together without meaning to? A concert, a stadium, even a quiet subway car at night. Lungs sinking unconsciously, guided by nothing but proximity. That's what the planet feels like now. Millions of tiny rhythms folding into one vast inhale. You stop at a newsstand. The headlines are cheerful lies, markets up, storms delayed, peace in progress. But buried at the bottom of one front page is a photograph, a wide-angle shot of the Pacific, taken from orbit. Thin silver lines trace across the surface in spirals, faint but precise. The caption reads, "Satellite error produces strange, oceanic artifacts." You stare at the image, tracing the lines with your eyes. They're not artifacts. You've seen that pattern before, deep below, etched in light across the trench. The ocean is speaking again, not with sound this time, but with geometry. That evening, you visit the harbor. The air feels charged, sharp enough to taste. Fishing boats rock in gentle motion, their lights reflected as trembling constellations on the water. You watch one for a while. The way it rises and falls seems slower, as though gravity itself has grown patient. An older man stands nearby, tossing breadcrumbs to gulls. He doesn't look surprised by the calm. "Tides are acting funny," he says without turning toward you. "Feels like the ocean's waiting for something." You nod. There's comfort in hearing someone else admit it out loud. He tosses another handful of crumbs and adds, "She gets quiet like this before big things." "Big things?" you ask. He smiles, lines deep around his eyes. Storms, births, wakes. He looks out toward the horizon. "Or visitors." The last word lands softly but doesn't vanish. It hangs in the salt air between you. You almost tell him what you've seen, what you've felt. The signals, the patterns, the mirror under the sea. But you stop yourself. Not because you doubt it, but because you know he already knows in his own way. The kind of knowing that comes without evidence, the kind the ocean teaches directly. Back home, your phone buzzes with updates you don't open, messages from friends who think the world feels weird lately. You type replies, then delete them. What could you say? That the weirdness is actually the most natural thing you've ever felt? You dim the lights and let the window glow with the comet's faint blue arc. 3I Atlas is brighter now, no longer just a visitor but a presence. When you close your eyes, you can almost sense its mass, not as an object but as attention, a gaze the size of a planet's memory. The scientists on late-night broadcasts still talk about trajectory corrections, gravitational anomalies, fragments breaking off. They don't talk about what's rising from below, about how the ocean's pulse has become so strong that seismographs now record it as background noise, about the reports of glowing swells rolling across the dark, like breath visible in cold air. They don't talk about the sound you're hearing right now, a low, distant tone threading through the walls, steady and unhurried. You stand by the window and realize it's the same pitch you felt in your bones during the descent, the same heartbeat beneath the sea. You whisper, "I hear you," and for the first time, the hum pauses, just for a second, as if the world is listening back. There's an ache that comes with wonder, a small grief for the comfort of ignorance. You feel it now, quiet and tender. The world is bigger than you thought, but also closer. The distance between sky and sea, between sound and silence, between knowing and not knowing, all of it is thinner than breath. You think of the whales singing in patterns, of the glowing trenches, of methane bursts like sighs, of a planet remembering its own language after too many centuries of forgetting. You pour a glass of water and hold it up to the window. The comet's light filters through it, scattering into soft rainbows on your palm. It looks like the ocean did beneath the submersible, fractured and whole at the same time. You drink slowly. The water tastes faintly metallic, as if carrying a message from its deeper self. When you set the glass down, you realize the hum hasn't returned. Not because it's gone, but because it's settled into you completely. You are no longer just listening, you're part of the resonance. And for the first time in days, maybe years, the silence feels right. Outside, the comet drifts a little closer, and the horizon glows like the line between a breath taken and a breath held. The world exhales. You exhale with it. Everything is listening. The day begins quietly, the kind of quiet that feels arranged. Sunlight filters through thin cloud like memory, soft, silver, almost hesitant. You sit by the window again with a mug of coffee that's already cooling, the city below wrapped in morning fog. There's that same sense of suspension, like a held note no one wants to resolve. You scroll absent-mindedly through your feed, but the noise of the world feels muffled now, as if a curtain of water has been drawn between you and everything else. Satellite anomalies, atmospheric resonance, temporary magnetic disturbances. Everyone is inventing names for the same heartbeat. You stop at one post, a photograph taken from orbit somewhere over the Indian Ocean. A bloom of plankton spirals in soft turquoise arcs, unmistakably deliberate. It's beautiful, almost calligraphic. The caption says, "Currents forming self-similar fractals at planetary scale." Probably a coincidence. You trace the pattern with your finger on the screen. The shape repeats itself endlessly, like breath, like thought. You already know what it means before you can articulate it. The currents are writing. The ocean is speaking in geometry now, visible even from space. The phrase returns to you, uninvited but welcome. Language of currents. Out on the coast, waves slide onto the shore as though practicing a phrase over and over, perfecting its tone. The waterline draws spirals, lines, loops. Beachgoers don't notice. To them it's just tide play, aesthetic chaos. But viewed from above, drones record something else entirely. Symmetry. The tide is no longer random. It's tracing shapes that mirror the comet's orbital diagrams. It isn't just the Pacific anymore. Reports come from every ocean, every hemisphere. Satellite imagery reveals a choreography too vast for accident. Each current, each bloom, each reflection in the water is a brushstroke in a language that has existed longer than words. You close your eyes and imagine it. The whole planet writing, the ink made of light and salt. At night, you dream of standing in orbit, looking down at Earth. The continents glow faintly, not with city lights, but with bioluminescence, ribbons of turquoise weaving through black water. From this height, the ocean looks like a living lung, expanding, contracting, shimmering. When you wake, your chest aches with the echo of it. The hum is gone, but its rhythm remains in your breathing. You sit up slowly, the room filled with that strange light that exists only between night and dawn, where everything looks slightly transparent, as if revealing its truer self. You walk to the balcony and lean out. The sea is far away, but you can feel it anyway. A pull under the skin, like tides shifting inside your veins. It's not metaphor anymore. It's physical. Across the world, researchers start comparing oceanic satellite data with the comet's telemetry. A quiet consensus begins to form, whispered through private channels, buried in footnotes. The two systems are synchronized. Every adjustment in 3I Atlas's motion is mirrored in the ocean's behavior, delayed by only minutes. The scale defies logic. The ocean is responding like an instrument being tuned. One scientist writes anonymously, "We are inside a dialogue between sky and sea." The line circulates quietly, copied, pasted, deleted, reposted. You read it one night before sleep, and it sticks in your mind like a song lyric. The next evening, the fog rolls in earlier than usual, thick and luminous. Streetlights blur into soft halos. You walk by the waterfront again, the same railing, the same rhythm beneath your shoes. The tide is unusually high, not aggressive, but alert. It laps against the dock as though listening for a cue. A group of teenagers nearby throw stones into the water. Each splash glows faintly blue for a moment before fading. They laugh, unaware of the bioluminescent residue curling in fractal spirals behind them. You stand there, watching, the way one watches fire, entranced, grateful, reverent. The air hums faintly, and you realize the sound isn't coming from the ocean, but from the lampposts, the cables, the pavement, all vibrating together, tuned by the same unseen hand. The city itself has joined the chorus. You whisper, "You're everywhere now, aren't you?" The waves answer with a shimmer, just enough to make your reflection ripple and blur. Back at home, you sit in the dark, laptop open, screensaver pulsing with faint light. Your inbox is full of unread messages, links, data, fragments from people around the world, videos of dolphins circling in complex patterns, recordings of low-frequency tones heard across continents. One clip shows a diver at shallow depth surrounded by fish forming a perfect sphere around him. You press play, and your speakers fill with the faint drone of sonar, that slow, patient pulse that feels older than language. Then buried in the background, you hear something new, a voice but not human, not quite. It sounds like vowels stretched across eternity, a tone so vast it carries through the bones. You listen to it again. The voice repeats, softer this time, shaped almost like a word. Your rational mind scrambles to assign meaning, but deep inside, something older translates it instantly. Not danger, not command, just acknowledgement. The ocean knows you hear it. You start keeping small notes, a quiet ritual before sleep. Not scientific data, not dreams, just fragments, moments, sensations. Currents draw circles like breath. The fog remembers shapes I haven't learned yet. Maybe listening is a kind of participation. Each line feels less like something you wrote and more like something that passed through you. The fear that used to accompany the unknown has changed. It hasn't disappeared, but it has softened, evolved into awe. It's not the fear of being watched anymore. It's the fear of being understood completely. And still, you keep writing, because the moment you stop, the hum returns, faint, patient, asking for attention. Outside, Three-Eye Atlas brightens further. Astronomers report an unexpected flare, a burst of light more radiant than before, lasting exactly 1 hour. The timing coincides with a global oceanic pulse. Every sensor on Earth records the same vibration. The planet sings, and the sky sings back. You step out onto your balcony once more, bathed in the comet's glow. The night feels like standing inside a living organism, air, sea, and skin all trembling with shared heartbeat. You whisper, barely audible, "We're listening." And somewhere out there, both above and below, the world answers. Not with sound, but with silence so full it feels like love. Night carries the soft weight of expectancy, the kind that hushes even late traffic. You leave the apartment without quite deciding to, drawn by the low pull under your ribs. The harbor is a dim geometry of ropes and rails, a sketch the sea keeps redrawing. Fog lies close to the water, luminous as breath on glass. You stand beside the same railing as before, palms on cold metal, and you listen for what you can't name, but would recognize the way you recognize your own footsteps in a stairwell. The first sign is small. A single patch of water seethes like soda, remembering its fizzy. Then another. Then a slow bloom of blue-white shimmer unspools across the bay, a seam being tugged open from beneath. Fish rise, not in frantic flight, but in deliberate ascent, bodies pulsing with bioluminescent punctuation. They arrange themselves in arcs and clusters that shouldn't exist outside of an artist's sketchbook. You see a line become an angle, become a figure you have traced on star maps, and your mouth forgets how to close. Not frenzy, formation. Lights along the pier falter, then steady, as if the grid, too, is paying attention. The gulls go quiet. Even the little kiosk that always insists on selling coffee tastes keeps its shutter down like a lowered eyelid. A shape blossoms farther out, an elongated curve pricked with points, the same arc you saw below the trench's mirror. You whisper a name you never meant to memorize. Your breath fogs, and the fog mirrors it in a wider gesture, like the night is practicing. From the darkness beyond the breakwater, massive silhouettes rise and hang just beneath the skin of the sea. Whales, yes, but also other, older outlines you can't catalog. Oarfish unspooling like silver sentences. squid turning their bodies into Morse, schools of lanternfish wheeling as if hinged at a common thought. Every ascent carries light, not from above but generated within, cold gleam that reveals edges and suggests rooms. The constellations rearrange themselves on the surface, learning Earth's spelling with the patience of natives pretending to be visitors. You think of the fear that used to appear whenever an empty hallway said nothing back, how it waited at the end of the corridor like an unasked question. Here it comes again, dutiful, checking the locks in your ribs, alone in the fog with a living map of the sky. Your body votes for caution. You accept its ballot, then place it gently beside a larger knowledge. You are not separate from this. The tide inside your veins is a shy cousin to the tide lifting these bodies. You are in the choir loft, not the audience. A small grounding detail sneaks in like a friendly neighbor. In your coat pocket is a half-melted mint from the cafe. You unwrap it without looking away, and the taste is comically out of place. Peppermint in a cathedral. You let it dissolve anyway. It's good to be absurd while the world arranges its spine. The fish keep spelling. Lines branch, meet, cross. Where the currents complicate, the pattern thickens. Where eddies offer calm, points hold steady as if pinned by invisible hands. You find the triangle that always anchors you, the one sailors have trusted for centuries, now made of living light. It sits precisely where the current slows, as though the ocean understands not only the shape of the sky, but the grammar of water's own momentum. Have you ever imagined a map that adjusts its stars to the wind so that navigation is less about finding and more about being found? Along the pier, a handful of other insomniacs stand like shadow punctuation. No one speaks enough to break the skin of the moment. A child lifts a gloved hand and traces a curve, and the curve obliges by brightening, as if a teacher had underlined it. Somewhere in you, an old door opens on soft hinges. The memory of sitting on a dark porch, listening to elders tell stories that made the night feel attentive. You realize you are inside one of those stories now, the telling and the told. From the deep, new voices join. The water vibrates with sub-bass vowels, the kind you don't so much hear as accept. Whales surge and hold, their bodies the size of rooms, their fins carving parentheses where smaller fish settle as clauses. A spiral tightens and becomes the comet's track, as you saw it in diagrams, then loosens into an unfamiliar figure that nevertheless feels right. The choir is not reproducing. It is remembering differently, allowing the original to keep breathing while it learns how to exhale through salt. Joke number 1 arrives just to keep your knees from locking. If the ocean is staging a planetarium show, do you owe it a ticket stub? You smile into your scarf, ridiculous in the best possible way, and the ridiculousness is a handrail. A swell lifts through the arrangements. Instead of smearing, the points flex and reform, as if elasticity were written into the score. The constellations shimmer, then settle, and you recognize a logic you've felt in your lungs. Inhale, exhale, return. A line of squid flares, then dims, in intervals that match the comet's microjet telemetry you pretended not to memorize. Farther out, an oarfish traces a long, deliberate path that quivers when the wind changes, then resumes, patient as tide work. You ask yourself the question that has been pacing your apartment at 3 a.m. If they are showing us where the story began, what responsibility do you have to the ending? It feels audacious to claim any. It also feels worse to pretend you have none. Responsibility may be as small as attention held steady, a candle cup against draft. The pattern swells. A star shape you can't name emerges, 5 points linked by threads of shining fish, the lines thickening where currents shear. The threads are schools, but they are also sentences. You let that word hover. Sentences. Language that chooses duration as its alphabet, breath as its punctuation, distance as its syntax. Have you ever thought that a paragraph might be measured not in words, but in meters of synchronized ascent? Closer to shore, smaller lives join, sardines becoming glittering commas, copepods dusting the margins, even a ribbon of jelly turning itself into a tilde so perfect you laugh out loud. The sound startles a seal that has been watching you watch. It splashes once, and the splash briefly inks a circle that fits itself inside a larger circle that glows, then fades. Your laughter folds back into awe without apology. Joke number 2 floats up gently. If the constellations are accurate, will one of the fish claim to be your rising sign? You imagine a horoscope written in brine. Expect sudden clarity. Hydrate. The thought steadies you in the way only silliness can when meaning threatens to exceed your capacity for neat shelves. A gust lifts the fog, and for a breath, the whole choreography is naked. The bay is a black field with stars installed at sea level. Far beyond, where the harbor mouth widens into real dark, the pattern extends into a sweep you can't see the end of, a mural that must stretch along miles of coast. Satellites above are undoubtedly recording a mirror of this moment, their cameras puzzling over why the sky appears to be lying on its back. You feel the old fear again, but it has changed clothes. It is not the dread of emptiness, it is the shiver that attends being witnessed by something kind. The thought you don't say aloud. What if the ocean isn't showing off for us, but reassuring the sky? The comet is close enough now that its presence can be felt in the thickness of the air, a polite weight on the room. The sea lifts its lights like a porch lamp left on for a traveler. A domestic thought tugs your sleeve. There's soup at home. Leftovers always taste better the second day because flavor needs time to speak to itself. Maybe that's what this is. Flavor meeting itself at planetary scale, time slow enough for meaning to simmer. You promise yourself a bowl later, a spoon clinking against the lip like a tiny bell to ground you back in walls and heat. The choir alters key. From beneath the fish constellations, darker shapes rise, manta rays, velvet and vast, bearing faint galaxies of parasitic lights like stolen skies. They glide just under the formations, lifting them the way a palm lifts a sheet so another can pass. The figures do not collapse. They translate. You can almost feel the sentence that lives inside the motion. We carry, you glow. And as if to answer, the plankton blooms along each ray's edge, making halos that burst and drift like commas, agreeing to be periods for a breath. Joke number 3 taps the moment lightly. Somewhere a biologist is losing their composure in the best possible way. You send them a silent apology and a congratulations, because sometimes discovery is a polite collapse. The pattern reaches its quiet crescendo. For 1 long minute, every light holds. No swell, no flicker, no adjustment. A portrait of origin, of a path through dark longer than any history book would dare print, hovers on water your hands could touch. It is not for touching, it is for keeping with your eyes, placing behind them like a talisman you will carry into rooms that would prefer fluorescent certainty. A question rises as the lights begin to loosen. What will you do with the piece of the choir that installed itself in your breath? You don't answer. You don't have to tonight. Your answer will be the shape of your listening tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. The fog returns, tucking the bay back into its pocket. Points drift lower, lower, and vanish, leaving only the after image that sticks to you like salt on skin. The harbor resumes its small noises, the creak of ropes, a buoy knocking a thought against a post, the distant essay of an engine. You stand unreasonably long, the railing cold and reliable under your hands, until your fingers ache and the world votes for sleep. On the walk home, storefronts sleep with their faces open, and the lone bakery you pass exhales the first warm rumor of morning bread. You breathe deeper without meaning to. Your hallway is still your hallway. Your lock still negotiates on the second turn. Your plant leans a little too far toward the window, as if it too had been watching. You pour a glass of water and hold it to your ear. Of course it says nothing. And yet, the silence has contour. You set the glass down, stretch, and feel the day's constellation settle into your bones like glowing silt. When you lie down, the room takes a breath with you. Somewhere out there, the comet adjusts by a fraction you will never calculate. Somewhere beneath, a school of fish chooses to be a sentence again. Between those two somewheres, you fall asleep inside the grammar. The next day arrives like an echo, soft, slightly delayed, but familiar. You wake before your alarm again. The sky beyond your window looks translucent, pale lavender bleeding into gray. The comet, faint now in the daylight, lingers like a thought you can't unthink. You stretch, slow and deliberate, the kind of movement that feels like testing gravity's patience. Something in the air feels thinner. You can't say why, only that breathing feels easier, lighter, as if the atmosphere has been tuned to a gentler frequency overnight. You put the kettle on and let its slow build of steam fill the quiet. When it whistles, it sounds almost like the soft rising tone that came through the sub's sonar, the one that made your chest ache without knowing why. You sip tea, glance at your phone, and see the news before you feel it. Satellite feeds flickering worldwide. The reports come in waves. Not panic, not yet. Just confusion. Live feeds of weather maps replaced by static. A brief flash of white. A shimmer like heat rising off asphalt. And then nothing. For several minutes, the sky is blind. When the feeds return, the images they show make you drop your cup. The comet's light has split. What was once a single tail now blossoms into 2, then 3, then countless fine threads of luminescent dust, stretching like filaments of thought. The shape isn't random. It curves, folds, and realigns, forming a symmetrical geometry, far too clean to be coincidence. You don't need the scientists' explanations. You know what this is. The comet isn't fracturing. It's revealing. You whisper to yourself, it's changing form. Outside, clouds pass quickly, and for a moment the sunlight dims unnaturally, like something vast is casting a shadow you can't see. The hum you've carried inside you for days returns, softer now, but steadier. You feel it not as sound, but as presence, a pressure behind the ribs, a low, benevolent insistence. You've learned not to resist it. You close your eyes and let the rhythm pass through. In coastal laboratories, researchers watch in silence as their screens fill with impossible readings. Instruments meant to track plankton distribution begin to show spectral interference patterns that shift in time with the comet's movements. A physicist whispers, "It's folding space." A biologist shakes her head. "No," she says softly, "it's folding light." But somewhere inside you, the deeper truth hums. its folding attention. The planet's surface glows faintly now, not everywhere, not all at once, but in scattered points along the oceans where the geometry aligns. Whales surface in mirrored formations. Coral fields emit synchronized bursts of bioluminescence. Atmospheric layers ripple with magnetized color. The sea is reflecting what the sky reveals. You walk outside, unable to stay still. The streets are quiet, subdued. People look upward without speaking, faces caught somewhere between fear and reverence. A child tugs his mother's sleeve and points, not at the comet, but at the sky around it. The faint network of light stretching outward like veins, connecting everything. You follow the child's gaze and realize what you're seeing isn't just light, it's structure, a framework revealing itself in brief flashes. The comet's divided form is weaving something invisible visible again. For a fleeting second, you think of the lattice you saw deep under the sea, the mirror plane bending light backward. This is its echo in the sky, the reflection above the reflection below. As above, so below, you murmur, the phrase feeling heavier now, less mystical and more literal. The wind changes direction. Every loose thing, paper, dust, even sound, seems to drift upward. The air is charged, almost ionized. You feel it in your hair, your teeth, your bones. The hum rises slightly in pitch, and the city holds its breath. Then, for exactly 7 seconds, the world goes still. No cars, no wind, no chatter. Even the sea freezes in place. The silence is total, dense, absolute. You think of every fear you've ever had of being alone in a strange place, and for a heartbeat, it returns. Sharp, primal. But this time, the fear carries a strange gentleness with it, as if the emptiness is aware of you, careful not to startle. And in that stillness, a sound like glass breathing fills the air. It's not a tone, not a voice, not even music. It's resonance, a shimmering alignment between every molecule of air and every drop of sea. The comet's divided form above, the mirrored lattice below, and everything between them vibrating in harmony. You realize it's the same frequency the planet has been pulsing in for weeks. It's reached perfect balance. Then, just as quickly, the silence breaks. The sea exhales. The wind resumes. Birds scatter in unison. And the light from the comet shifts again, dimming, contracting, folding inward. What remains is a single point, brighter than any star you've ever seen. It flickers once, then steadies, hovering where the comet's heart once was. From orbit, satellites capture something unprecedented, a perfectly symmetrical burst of plasma shaped like a circle expanding from that point, its edges forming intricate interference patterns, the same shapes drawn by ocean currents days before. From the shore, you see it differently. To you, it looks like an eye-opening. You don't sleep that night. You sit by the window, lights off, watching the sky breathe. The comet's remnants drift slowly, no longer a streak, but a halo that bends faintly with the Earth's curvature. It looks less like destruction and more like completion. You think about how silence can sometimes sound like understanding, how fear can coexist with beauty without canceling it out. Have you ever thought about how every reflection is technically light trying to return home? The hum fades from your chest, leaving warmth in its place, the kind you feel after a long conversation that didn't need words. You whisper, "Thank you," not sure to whom, and the night seems to shimmer in reply. Down below, somewhere unseen, the ocean mirrors that shimmer, one last faint pulse of phosphorescence rolling through the tide. As above, so below, and between them, you, awake and breathing, the witness to a dialogue older than the world itself. You don't expect the message to arrive while you're doing laundry, but that's how it happens. You, in a hallway that smells faintly of detergent and warm pennies, waiting for the washer to finish its curt little drum solo, ordinary life humming its domestic key. Your phone is face down on the machine because you are trying to practice the art of letting a thing be a thing, clothes, a chore, a small rhythm in a big week. Then the machine stops. The corridor goes too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes an empty stairwell feel like it's leaning toward you. You reach for your phone without looking like you've decided to reach. On the screen, a short clip from a researcher whose name you recognize, and a caption, "You'll want sound on for this." You press play. At first, it's the familiar low ocean drone, the infrasonic long vowels you've half adopted as a heartbeat. Then a braid of higher tones threads in, so faint you feel them behind your ears before you hear them. The spectrogram overlaid on the video blooms with color, ridges, and ladders and sleeping rainbows. You watch the algorithm's cursor crawl, the way a finger traces old script. The system tries transcriptions it has no right to attempt. It matches pulse intervals to every archive it can find, whale syntax, storm cadence, even the metronomic tick of the sub's calibration. It fails, then fails upward. It stops translating from anything and starts translating with everything. A writer switching from dictionary to breath. A line resolves, not letters, durations, not words, intervals made into edges. The phonemes are impossible, but the cadence is not. Your chest knows the sentence before your mind gives itself permission. The captions appear, pale as fog over a bay. We were never gone. You don't move. Your body performs the dumb physics of awe. Mouth part open, shoulders forgetting posture, hands forgetting they have jobs. The corridor's fluorescent light flickers once, a moth impersonating fate. You look left and right, as if someone might have heard the line escape the headphones and file a complaint with the building about messages from the abyss at off-peak hours. The clip rolls on, the tones repeat, but each time the harmonics lean into a slightly different emphasis, the way a friend will repeat a sentence for a child and adjust where the kindness lands. We were never gone, not defensive, not triumphant. The grammar of reassurance spoken across pressure. You replay it until the loop is a soft bruise of meaning layered under the skin. The laundry room's hum resumes, quieter now, like the machines have agreed to whisper. You gather the warm clothes into a basket, and the warmth itself feels like punctuation, something that was busy a moment ago now resting, ready to be useful. On the walk back to your apartment, you carry the words like a candle in a paper cup. Gone assumes a map, never assumes a clock. The message suggests both have been misdrawn. If presence can be quiet enough to pass for absence, what else have you mistaken for empty? In your kitchen, the kettle obliges your need for ritual. Steam ghosts the window. Your hands learn again that mugs are warm and mugs are small, and small can be sufficient. A domestic fact. There is half a lemon on the cutting board, its rind drying, because you started tea last night and wandered off into a thought and forgot it. The lemon looks like a moon that behaved itself. You slice it anyway. Help it do its work. Return to the screen because you cannot not. The researcher's update includes raw files, hydrophone arrays across basins. Each capture different layers of the same sentence. In some, the first syllable is stretched until minutes become a vowel. In others, the last two words arrive braided with plankton fluorescence, as if the ocean insisted on subtitles. In one outlier, the never is an absence rather than a sound, a shaped quiet at the exact interval where the vibration should be. You add that to your private dictionary. Sometimes never is a deliberately held breath. Have you ever wondered if a translation could arrive as a change in weather? As you ask it, a draft slips under the window like a lowercase question mark. Outside, the sky wears that metallic sheen glass gets when it wants to be water. You feel the old motel corridor fear pad up beside you, the reflex that checks locks and listens for someone else's footsteps. You let it lean against your knee while you keep listening. Fear is not the villain here. It's the usher reminding you to find your seat before the next movement begins. More data arrives. The sentence co-occurs with a tremor in the thermocline, global but gentle, a soft flex in the boundary where warm and cold agree to disagree. Coral cameras pick up a wave of polyp opening that times itself to the message. Whales insert a space in their song at the same place the translation says, never. The ocean is an audience that knows when to hold silence and when to applaud with light. Your phone buzzes with a text from a friend who believes in mystery only when it is well lit. So, are they back? You type and erase a dozen replies, finally send, maybe they never left. Then, because small jokes make big truths breathable, you add, turns out the ocean has better attendance than any of us. A typing bubble appears, then vanishes. Everyone is learning how to speak slowly. The clip plays again. We were never gone. You test the sentence against the outline your life has drawn on the day. The words nestle into unexpected corners. The plant that kept leaning toward light while you were away. The bread you forgot to freeze and somehow it was fine, the way your heartbeat has learned a polite duet with the planets tonight. Presence as continuity rather than arrival, a river you mistook for a sequence of ponds. You open a notebook because keys feel too noisy for this. You write the sentence longhand and it looks different on paper, less assertive, more like a reminder someone tucks into your coat before you leave the house. You add a small question beneath it. If they were never gone, where were we? The question sits there without teeth. It is not trying to accuse you of anything. It is trying to invite you into scale. A wave of curiosity lifts you. Have you ever imagined history as a vertical stack rather than a line? Epics layered in pressure, voices closer than they look when you flatten them into chapters? If the ocean is a column of stored present, then of course anything that chooses to live in duration rather than in alarm clocks could be here always, and the failure was not theirs, but our tempo. The laundry is still warm when you fold it. The heat feels like a friend holding the door until you catch up. You think of thresholds and pacts and the way the trench turned starlight into grammar. You remember the way the lattice carried the comet's path before the sky admitted it. We were never gone is not a boast. It's a mirror placed at ankle height, so you finally notice the waterline running through your days. You play the clip one more time on speakers, soft enough that the walls won't learn the sentence before you do. The vowels open like bays. The consonants, if that's what they are, behave like currents rounding headlands. The final cadence releases into a rest that is not emptiness, but permission. You feel the floor under your feet the way you do during a long hug when you remember weight is a kind of safety. A small, close-to-life knowledge tides in. Socks always go missing in pairs. You find two mismatches, shrug, and decide they can be a duet. Imperfect mirror, constant company. You are amused by how appropriate the silliness feels. A matched set would be a poorer metaphor tonight. The building's pipes murmur, old plumbing speaking in its mineral tongue. For a moment it resolves into the exact interval that sits between where and never. You smile at coincidence like you would at a neighbor you recognize but can't place. The kettle clicks as it cools. The plant earns a glass of water for witnessing. These things matter because they are where meaning stays when the miraculous returns to low tide. You step to the window. 3i Atlas is a softened brightness now, the single point you watched last night breathing a little slower. Above, faint filaments lift and loosen like a tent being folded with care. Below, though you can't see it, you know the mirror plane is holding a dim echo. The deep's way of pressing save. The sentence has already traveled into the walls of trenches and the shells of slow animals and the weave of kelp. The delivery will continue in silence you cannot chart. You ask yourself the required question, the one every message earns. What is the ask? It might be no more complex than this. Notice, remember, keep pace. Or it might be simply what was said. We were never gone, and the rest is up to how you choose to move your own small tide through rooms and streets and conversations that prefer the weather to the climate of wonder. Night gathers with the courtesy of soft lamps. You turn none on. The room is a gradient of gray that respects your eyes. In the hush, your fear pads down the hallway once more, sits at the threshold like a good dog unwilling to intrude. It's okay, you tell it, and mean it. Alone is less alone when the building shares a sentence with the trench. You lie down. The sentence nests behind your ribs like a known melody you don't need to hum. We were never gone. The words widen into a geography where your breathing fits. You think you feel the planet answer, not as sound but as posture. Spine long, lungs easy, the dignified relief of a place that has been waiting to be heard at its chosen tempo. Sleep meets you early for once, not as a surrender, but as participation. Outside, a gust combs the street and finds nothing to move but leaves. Inside, in the patient architecture of your chest, a promise arranges itself without telling you its clauses. If you dream tonight, you will dream a door you've always walked through, noticing the hinge for the first time. Morning begins with an absence of news. That's how you know something has changed. The television hums with canned brightness, but every network is quiet on 3i Atlas. Not because the comet is gone, because no one knows what to say about it anymore. They've run out of language for the miraculous. You sip your coffee in silence. The flavor is deeper somehow, darker at the edges, like it's been steeped in sleep. You're not sure if it's the drink that's changed or you. Outside, the world moves normally again, or pretends to. Children in bright raincoats splash through puddles. A bus exhales at the corner, breathing its human cargo into the day. But something invisible hums beneath it all, a subtle coordination. Even the pigeons seem to turn their heads at the same moment, like a quiet metronome conducts everything at once. You realize it's the rhythm again, the same old pulse, but now softer, like background radiation of consciousness. You tap your finger on the table without thinking. 5, pause. 3, pause. 5. It's everywhere, embedded in everything. The hum is not outside you anymore. It's the atmosphere itself. Later that day, the universities release a joint statement. Spectral analysis of 3i Atlas's residue reveals complex organic carbon chains structured in repeating hexagonal symmetry. To most, it sounds like another scientific curiosity, just cosmic chemistry. To you, it sounds like handwriting. You scroll through the research notes online, the ones buried deep in the footnotes where nobody reads. The pattern, they say, is biological but not biological, a hybrid of living and crystalline architecture. One scientist writes off the record, "It's as if two modes of intelligence are coexisting in the same structure, self-repairing matter and self-aware geometry." You lean back and close your eyes. Self-aware geometry. The phrase feels like a key fitting into an ancient lock. It hits you suddenly, like breath catching. The comet wasn't alive. It was remembering. All afternoon you walk the shoreline. The waves are calm, unusually so, rolling in steady, symmetrical sets. Each crest seems to follow a pattern, faintly mathematical. You could almost count them, if counting still mattered. You remember a line you once read, "The difference between chaos and music is listening." Maybe that's all Earth is doing now, listening well enough for the first time. The sky looks wider than usual, the horizon a long silver thread that feels almost close enough to touch. You imagine pulling it gently, as if it were fabric stretched between two beings, the sea and the sky, stitched together across time, and you, the seamstress's mistake, or the intended knot. As twilight deepens, you sit by the water, the air thick with the faint scent of ozone and salt. The comet's halo is still visible, faint but persistent, its particles scattering like embers across the upper atmosphere. If you squint, you can almost see patterns within the light itself, shapes forming and dissolving. The world is writing again, just slower now, in cursive. You whisper into the dusk, "What are you trying to tell us?" The tide answers not in sound, but in motion. The next wave that rolls in stops inches from your feet and holds there, trembling as if considering you. For a breathless moment, you feel the distinct sensation of being regarded, not by something above or below, but by the planet itself, through the medium of its own skin. Then the wave retreats. You sit perfectly still, half laughing at yourself, half afraid to move in case the ocean decides to speak again. That night you wake at 3:33 a.m. The light in the room is wrong. Not the golden warmth of the lamp, not the blue tint of your phone screen. This is a softer radiance, like moonlight filtered through milk. It doesn't come from outside. It comes from the walls themselves, faint and pulsing. You step closer. Your shadow doesn't follow. The air hums with that same resonance, though quieter now, less a call and more a lullaby. You press your palm against the wall and feel warmth. No, not warmth. Awareness. Images flicker behind your eyelids, not as visions, but as impressions. Trenches blooming with light, coral polyps opening like eyes, the curvature of continents glowing in the dark like veins. And there, suspended between them, that same pattern you saw beneath the sea and above the sky, the lattice, the mirror, the equation of symmetry. Except now, you see what you hadn't before. The pattern includes you. It includes all of us. The realization doesn't frighten you. It soothes you. It's the relief of understanding that you were never the observer, never the scientist standing apart. You were always part of the formula, an integer within an ancient collaboration. For a moment, you feel yourself dissolve into it completely. Your heartbeat slows until it matches the rhythm of the walls, the rhythm of the world. There's no border between your skin and the air, between sound and thought. This, you think, is what harmony feels like. The words from the message echo back through memory. We were never gone. Maybe they weren't talking about themselves. Maybe they were talking about you, about humanity, about the part of existence that forgot it was connected. When you open your eyes, the glow is gone. The room has returned to its usual dim quiet, but you can still feel the presence lingering, patient, loving, like a tide waiting for your next breath. You pour yourself a glass of water and drink slowly. The taste is different, softer, almost sweet. You stare at the surface of the water in the glass, at the way light bends and dances across it. It looks like a miniature version of what you saw beneath the trench, the reflection of a reflection, the memory of the deep carried upward in small, trembling ripples. You set the glass down gently and whisper, "We were never gone, either." The hum answers, faint but certain, from somewhere inside the walls, the floor, the world. And this time, it feels like laughter. Outside, dawn begins its quiet rehearsal. The comet's halo fades slowly into pale morning, leaving only the trace of its path, a subtle streak across the sky, glowing like the line between sleep and waking. The world breathes evenly again. The hum remains, but it's no longer separate. It's not above or below. It's within. You smile, tired but alive, feeling as though you've just been reintroduced to your own planet. You turn off the light, not to return to sleep, but to listen, because the walls, the air, and even your heartbeat are still quietly speaking the same ancient language. The day tilts, almost imperceptibly at first, like a table leg settling into its proper groove. You're making breakfast, nothing ceremonial, just toast and the stubborn heel of yesterday's loaf, when the knife on the counter does a thin, polite rattle. You look up. The glass in the cupboard hums a single vowel, then quiets. It's not an earthquake, not the jump scare shudder that sends pets under beds and neighbors to doorways. It's gentler, as if something beneath the continents has just cleared its throat. You stand still, butter cooling on bread, and listen with the part of your body that has learned not to rely on ears. The vibration returns in a longer phrase, low, steady, paced like breath. Somewhere in the news cycle, a word will be waiting, microseisms. But you don't want vocabulary tonight. You want posture. You let your shoulders settle into the feeling that the planet is practicing being a single thing. Outside, power lines draw soft harp notes from the wind. The pigeon on the railing does a little tremor of feathers that looks absurdly like applause. You set the plate down and walk to the window. The street appears ordinary, a jogger negotiating a puddle like it's a treaty, a bus inhaling people and exhaling schedules, a kid performing a quiet rebellion against a zipper. And yet the skin of everything, glass, concrete, air, shares a tempo. The continents are breathing, and the city is a rib cage that knows how to move. You've felt alone in stairwells more times than you care to admit, that long, narrow architecture of doubt. For a heartbeat, the old fear tries to roll its suitcase down your hallway. What if the ground forgets you? What if the map changes without warning and you're the dot left floating? You set a hand against the wall. The wall answers with a small, confident pulse that says, "Counted." The fear sits on the steps, chastened but present. You let it stay. No one should have to witness the world becoming itself alone. The first message pings your phone. A seismologist you don't know well, forwarding a figure in which the lines look like synchronized handwriting. Tidal phase lock with long-period surface waves, the caption offers, apologetic for how miraculous the phrase is. The next ping is a satellite overlay. bright threads along coastlines matching, beat for beat, with tremor signatures crossing continents. A third ping is a voice memo from the pilot, wind in her mic, sea in her tone. Feels like standing between two sleeping giants who decided to breathe together, she says, and laughs once, quietly, as if not to wake them. On the shore, beaches trade shapes. Sandbars that lay east-west turn north-south. Swash lines draw ovals where they used to write arrows. Far inland, wheat fields ripple in crescendos that match tide charts. Even the boring miracle of traffic lights seems to adjust. Greens lingering a breath longer where crowds need to flow. Reds shortening as if the city has learned lung capacity. You think of conductors who slow a symphony by a hair to let the room join the note. Maybe this is that, a tempo that chooses mercy. You make tea because domestic anchors keep boats from bragging. The kettle practices its one aria. Steam curls like cursive that remembers childhood. You squeeze the tired half-lemon that has been mooning your cutting board for days and drop the slice into the cup. The small hiss is reassuring. Chemistry still loves you. You sip, tasting patience, and ask the question you've been avoiding since the comet braided light into instruction. What happens to lines once they admit they were always part of a circle? A pulse travels through the building with the dignity of an old elevator. Across town, paint cracks in a cathedral's high ceiling, just a hairline, just enough to let a sliver of dust drift into sun. In the harbor, boats bob in unison like punctuation agreeing on a sentence. Offshore buoys report tide surges arriving a fraction early, as if the moon has been promoted from actor to ensemble. In a desert half a world away, a dry lake bed flickers with heat at exactly the moment your bay breathes inward, as though the planet were smoothing its own sheet. You go walking because motion helps you think at Earth speed. The sidewalk trembles so faintly you could confuse it with memory. Lampposts nod. A shop bell does a single thoughtful ring as you pass. In a park, a row of elms leans and then straightens in agreement with something you can't see, leaves flickering their silver undersides like they're showing the sky all their receipts. A man on a bench looks up from his newspaper, squints, shrugs, returns to a crossword where confluence will fit later if he's brave. Joke one arrives to keep you from floating away. If the continents are a pair of lungs, does that make islands freckles or dimples? You snort softly, ridiculous and grateful. Humor is ballast when wonder threatens to steal your shoes. On a pedestrian bridge, you pause mid-span. The river below keeps time with a tide it's not supposed to know, swells thickening at the same intervals the ocean breathes. You rest your forearms on the rail. The metal hums at a pitch you recognize from the trench. In your pocket, a crumpled note you wrote nights ago. Light bends, salt hums, the sea breathes first. Decides to add a line of its own. Stone follows. You don't remember writing it. Maybe you didn't have to. Data spills in if you let it. Arrays show Rayleigh waves, those rolling, ground-hugging undulations, arriving in patterns that map onto the current fields the satellites have been tracing. The geophysicists argue kindly about causation and correlation, and then one of them, too tired for turf, types, "What if it's neither? What if it's choreography?" No one replies for a long minute. When they do, it's with the kind of careful language professionals use when opening doors they were trained to leave shut. At home, the plant by your window has leaned further, as if eavesdropping on the sidewalk's conversation with the sky. You turn the pot a quarter turn, a small kindness, a shared joke. Don't hoard the light. You tell it, and it does not object. You surrender to the small pleasure of ordering a room that the planet currently refuses to keep still. A stack of books becomes less precarious. The soup container goes from back of fridge to front. Your socks, historically adversarial, vote to pair, badly but sincerely. The hum inside you returns at a lower pitch, like a cello testing its richest string. You sit on the floor because chairs feel ceremonial tonight. The boards under your palms vibrate with the same thoughtful pulse you felt in the harbor railing, in the bridge, in the sub's hull. You had believed water would be the messenger and stone the scribe. Now stone speaks, and you realize the script has simply widened its margins. Have you ever imagined a map not of borders, but of breathing? Contours not of altitude, but of exhale? You close your eyes and see continents outlined in slow light, not static plates, but floating syllables. The old diagrams on schoolroom walls cheerfully lied by omission. They forgot to draw the part where everything moves together when the sentence requires emphasis. Another tremor, kinder than weather, moves through the city. Chandeliers in expensive rooms perform a modest waltz. Cheap blinds in rented windows shiver as if complimented. Somewhere, a bakery's sheet pans ring a neat chord. You stand and feel for a moment absurdly tall, as if good posture could make you a better antenna. The fear edges in again. Lonely hallway, wrong footstep, the empty room leaning. "I'm here," you say to no one heroic, and the floor replies in a cadence that sounds suspiciously like agreement. Your phone lights with a clip from the pilot. View from a deck this time, horizon stretched like a taut string. Sea and sky are the same color for a breath. "Listen," she says, but holds her own voice back, and the microphone catches it. Not surf, not wind, not engine, but the soft, planetary groan of crust and tide finding the middle of themselves. "They're sinking," she whispers at last. "You can feel it in your teeth." You can. Your molars buzz like distant bees. Your sternum picks up a beat that's not entirely yours. You wonder, not without tenderness, what will you choose to keep steady when the ground volunteers to sway? The answer arrives as practical as laundry. Water a plant, stir a pot, call a friend. Small metronomes inside the grand one. Joke two surfaces, brave and necessary. If the world is one big lung, then your building is a nostril. You apologize to it on principle and promise to dust more often. Dust is simply history that lost its shelf. Night lands with a softness that feels earned. The comet's halo, thinning but present, smears a pale signature along the upper dark. Below, the mirror plane you cannot see is surely brightening where the trench breathes out. In between, roofs and roads, porches and parks, everything is a diaphragm. You open the window a hand's width. The air enters with the cautious courtesy of a guest who knows you keep tidy hours. You lie down. The bed lifts and settles almost too gently to be real. This is not the rocking of a ship. It's the planet checking its blanket. In the dark, you ask one last question, the kind that only belongs to rooms without lights. If the divide was always an agreement, what new sentence becomes possible when the signatories remember the pen? The answer is not a voice. It's a long, even breath that aligns your own without asking. The oldest lullaby in a key you finally know. The night is long, but not lonely. You wake several times, not from noise, but from its absence, that pregnant silence where the world seems to pause between words. Each time you open your eyes, the faintest tremor hums through the walls, like the breath of something vast and dreaming beneath the floorboards. You don't move. You let it pass through you, half convinced that if you stay still enough, it might mistake you for part of itself. By dawn, the air feels different, lighter, charged, awake. You step outside barefoot. The pavement holds a trace of warmth, though the sun hasn't fully risen. Clouds drift high and strange, in long latticed streaks that look less like vapor and more like handwriting. You squint upward, tracing the shapes as you once traced the undersea constellations, and realize you're seeing it again. The same geometry, the same deliberate symmetry. The comet is still out there, its body diffused now into thousands of smaller orbs, each one glinting faintly in the sunlight. It isn't falling, it's arriving. All across the globe, reports emerge, bright fragments descending through the atmosphere, slow as lanterns, their trajectories precise and patient. They don't burn like meteors, they glide. In coastal towns, fishermen pull their boats ashore, staring as spheres of light drift down and settle on the water's surface without a splash. Some descend straight into the sea, vanishing beneath the waves. Others hover at the surface, pulsing softly like enormous jellyfish. From orbit, satellites record an image that spreads across news feeds before the networks can decide what narrative to attach to it. Thousands of glowing orbs dotting the oceans, connected by thin filaments of luminescence that trace the continent's edges. The planet suddenly looks webbed, networked, alive. You watch it unfold from your balcony, the sky faintly shivering with color. The nearest fragment appears miles offshore, a single hovering sphere the size of a house, bright and serene, its reflection trembling on the water like a thought that refuses to end. You whisper, "They've come home." Scientists will later call them micro-orbs, fragments of three-eye atlas composed of carbon silicate composites, each one semi-translucent and self-sustaining. They drift for hours, days, before slowly descending beneath the surface, merging with bioluminescent plankton blooms as though feeding them light. But you know better. You've seen how the sea learns to sing back. These aren't objects. They're invitations. That evening, the harbor becomes a mirror. The sea glows faintly from below, blue bleeding into violet, violet into gold. People line the docks in silence. The air tastes faintly metallic, sweet at the edges. Like the moment before rain, the orbs are descending now, dozens of them, moving in graceful arcs, merging gently with the water. The waves accept them without resistance. Each one that enters the ocean releases a shimmer of light that spreads outward in concentric rings. You watch as one settles directly beneath the pier, its glow tracing the wooden beams in pale fire. For a moment, the entire harbor floor becomes visible. Rocks, silt, the dark outlines of fish, moving like living punctuation. The glow ripples outward, then fades to a steady pulse, synchronized with the ocean's heartbeat. People begin to cry quietly, not out of fear, but relief, a kind of ancient recognition they can't explain. You find your throat tightening, not with sadness, but with something closer to belonging. It feels like the planet exhaling after holding its breath for millennia. You stay until the last of the orbs disappears beneath the surface. The water settles, calm and glassy, though a faint shimmer lingers in its depths. The stars above seem to echo it, brighter than usual, the sky reflecting the sea, reflecting the sky. For a long time, no one moves, no one dares. Then, slowly, you begin to hear it again, that low hum, not in the air this time, but in the soles of your feet. A deep vibration, steady and vast, as though the earth itself is purring. You place a hand over your heart. The rhythm matches. At first, the changes are subtle. The tides shift by fractions of an inch. Weather patterns even out. Coastal currents flow smoother, as if recalibrated by invisible hands. Birds migrate in perfect arcs. Coral reefs begin to glow faintly at night. Scientists scramble to measure it, but the metrics refuse to stay still. Environmental resonance, they call it. Anomalous global synchronization. But those who have been listening, the divers, the sailors, the insomniacs at their windows, know it's more than that. It's alignment. You feel it in everything, your dreams, your heartbeat, even the mundane rhythm of brushing your teeth or washing dishes. The hum is everywhere now, not loud, not invasive, just present. The world is breathing in time with itself again. Later that night, you dream of the deep. You're floating weightless above the ocean floor, surrounded by soft, luminous light. The orbs are there, hundreds of them, their surfaces alive with motion. You realize they're not solid. They're porous, alive with streams of microscopic life, algae, bacteria, even small fish swimming through them as if they were reefs made of light. And beneath them, something older stirs. You see shapes moving below, vast, fluid, deliberate, not machines, not creatures, but something in between. They move slowly, reverently, touching each orb in turn. Each contact sends ripples upward that pass through you, like the echo of a thought. Then, from within the darkness, a figure rises. It's enormous, but not monstrous. A silhouette shaped from water and light, its form ever shifting, as if composed of both wave and memory. It doesn't approach you. It simply hovers, regarding you with something like patience. When it speaks, there is no sound, only understanding. You are not apart. You never were. The words are simple, but they undo you. All the fear, all the awe, all the ache of separation dissolves in an instant, replaced by the quiet certainty of connection. The being lowers its gaze, and you see beneath it an immense network of glowing veins spreading across the seafloor. A living map of everything pulsing in harmony. You realize, trembling, that you're seeing the merge. The stars have come home to the sea. The ocean is no longer just water. It's memory, intelligence, consciousness. The two have found each other again, not to conquer or to save, but to become whole. When you wake, your pillow is damp with tears you don't remember crying. Outside, the horizon glows faintly, the water breathing light. You whisper into the dawn, "Welcome back." A gull calls in the distance, not random but timed, almost as if echoing your words. You smile, and the hum within you responds like laughter. The age of separation is ending. You step out onto the balcony, and the air feels charged with a gentleness you've never known. Above, the last remnants of Three-Eye Atlas shimmer faintly in the pale light. Below, the ocean glows like a heart finally remembering its pulse. You exhale. The world exhales with you. Morning arrives with the softness of a tide that knows you by name. The air carries that faint mineral sweetness you've learned to associate with good news from the sea, the sort that smells like rain that decided to be kind. You stand at the window and feel it before you register what it means, a lightness in your ribs, a clarity at the crown of your head, as if someone opened a small skylight inside you during the night. News trickles in the way dew does, quiet, everywhere at once. City power grids report fewer spikes, fewer stutters. Hospitals note a measurable drop in nighttime alarms. Heart monitors settle, as if the rhythm outside the walls has agreed to stop jostling the rhythm within. Trains arrive within a whisper of their scheduled minute across 3 continents. None of these things are miracles alone. Together, they feel like the world finally found its key. You walk. The sidewalks hold their ordinary bargains: dogs negotiating leashes, coffee balancing lids, a cyclist muttering apologies to air. Yet everything seems to select the same tempo without trying. Pedestrians pause for each other with the grace of rehearsed dancers. Crosswalk signals blink at moments that feel chosen rather than allotted. Even the pigeons coordinate a small wheel of flight that arrives back at the same roof ledge without collision, as if they'd all been given the same page of sheet music overnight. On a corner, a child draws with a stick and dust, spirals inside spirals that look suspiciously like the currents you've been watching from orbit. When the wind combs the powder smooth, she smiles as if the erasure is part of the drawing. You want to tell her the sea is drawing that too, in light you can't see from here. Instead, you hold the moment like a small shell in your palm. Domestic fact, to keep the wonder from floating away. Your left shoe squeaks on the 3rd step of your stairwell every time. It still does. Some reliabilities should remain petty. By mid-morning, the orbs offshore are fewer, but the water's glow, subtle, persistent, has learned to breathe without them. Fishermen return with nets lighter than usual, but lined with fine silver threads that dissolve on touch, a residue like dew that tastes faintly of salt and sun if you dare. You don't, but you like the idea. In a lab on the other side of the world, a biologist watches bacteria colonize one of the micro-orb fragments. They don't just cling. They adapt the fragment's surface into a scaffolding for an unexpected bloom, like ivy discovering it can teach brick to be generous. The age of confluence doesn't announce itself. It installs gently, like a new habit that feels older than the one it replaces. In libraries, the air seems quieter, not because people whisper more, but because the silence has weight again, the good kind that keeps you company. In kitchens, water boils just shy of impatience and remembers not to spit. At construction sites, cranes pause for wind a second before a caution flag would have told them to. You don't know if this is the ocean speaking through steel, or steel listening to the ocean by accident and deciding to keep the skill. Have you ever imagined you could think with more than one part of the world at a time? Brain and weather, skin and tide, breath and stone, without losing your own outline. You test it by simply standing still. Your body doesn't evaporate into the chorus. It keeps its edge, like a shoreline at slack water. The miracle isn't dissolution, it's conversation. Fear arrives for its appointed rounds, checking the dark places. The elevator at midnight, the alley with the broken lamp, the feeling on a long road that the horizon is ignoring you. You let the fear sit beside you on a park bench. Across the path, 2 older women play a card game that looks like they invented it on the walk over. The rules flow like water around rocks, rigid and generous. The fear shrugs, softer than it used to be, taking the night watch but not the whole shift. You ask it, quietly, "Are you what's left when we forget we belong?" It doesn't answer. That's okay. Not all questions are traps. Some are lanterns you leave on for later. At noon, a notification finds you. Updates from ocean floor cams near the trench. The frames are cathedral dimness, lifted by the clean lunar light you now recognize. Rays glide like unwritten sentences. Schools stitch themselves into clauses, then release. And there, like a good rumor turning true, you see a pattern tracing along the sediment, miles wide. Not quite a road and not quite a route. It pulses in slow light. A caption from someone braver than their funding calls it a vascular network for thought. You exhale, and the word that wants to come is circulation. Not of blood, of attention. You eat on a pier where gulls pretend they're owed royalties for the view. The sandwich tastes like what it is: bread, tomato, apology to lettuce, and also a tiny bit like after-storm air, mineral, clean. Joke number 1 stands up and wobbles cheerfully. If ambience were a seasoning, today's is planetary. You snort, which startles a gull into dignity. It forgives you because you give it a corner of crust. You forgive yourself because you're learning new scales, and the old keys still want to play. In the afternoon, you visit a museum because old objects know how to hold new truths. A bronze figure stands with its arms out, palms up, the metal greened by 1,000 slow breaths from strangers. Today its pose looks less like supplication and more like balance. In a quiet gallery, a video loop of satellite imagery has been turned into art. Coastlines thinking in light, eddies writing letters to the moon, the micro-orbs dissolving into reefs that weren't on yesterday's maps. You sit on the bench and let the pixels wash you. A small, practical thought knocks. You should defrost something for dinner. Intelligence is grand. Hunger is punctual. When you step back outside, the city has learned a new courtesy. People look up from screens not to avoid each other, but to find sky. It's a shared reflex now, like holding a door or offering a seat. You watch a teenage boy stop at a curb, not because the light is red, but because a snail is in the crosswalk, and he becomes a crossing guard with 2 careful hands. This is not proof of alien anything. This is proof of alignment's minor miracles. You hope someone buys that boy a pastry. By evening, the sky lays down a sheet of blue so clean it almost clicks. The last shreds of 3-eye Atlas's halo thin into filaments you can barely see unless your eyes have practiced. Yours have. You can. The water below wears a soft interior glow, a hush that reaches shore as a readiness rather than a warning. You sit where you always sit, same railing, same view, because ritual is how the body remembers it's allowed to be changed. The first sound is not a sound. It's a feeling in your teeth and the small bones of your ears, an intimation that the sentence is advancing to its next clause. Then music, if music can be made of duration rather than notes. A chord the size of weather settles over the bay. Whales lift and breathe in metered lines. The micro-orb reefs answer with prismatic flare, the light traveling in rings that pass through pilings, through plankton, through you, without asking for translation. Children on the boardwalk invent a game where they jump when the light reaches their shoes. They never miss. A woman with a stroller hums along on a tone she couldn't have named yesterday. 2 men who have argued about sports for decades fall quiet and lean their shoulders together like bookends. You catch yourself crying a little, a simple leak, not a drama, because you didn't know your face could make room for this shape of joy. Joke number 2 drifts in like a flotation device. If the planet is a choir, someone should hand out pitch pipes at customs. You imagine a bowl of them by each shoreline, labeled for nervous travelers, and you laugh out loud. The person next to you laughs too, not because they heard your thought, but because laughter has decided to become tidal tonight. The merging is not a takeover, it's a handshake that settles into a pulse. You realize the ocean's intelligence is not arriving to replace yours, and the star-born memory is not here to supervise. They are interleaving the way fingers do when you finally stop resisting a comfort you thought you didn't deserve. One born of water, one of the stars, the outline promised. You watch the promise keep itself, not as a ceremony, but as breath that finally includes everything it always meant to. You ask gently, a question you will keep asking, what is my part that only I can offer? The answer that arrives is so ordinary you almost miss it. Attention that doesn't fray, care that is small enough to be carried daily, speech that leaves air for replies. You can do those. You already are. On your walk home, the streetlights hum in a key that makes your shoulders drop. The fear trails behind you at a reasonable distance, and then, unexpectedly, trots ahead to sniff the dark corners first, like a cautious friend. The hallway smells like laundry and somebody's cinnamon. Your plant, conspirator, witness, leans toward your face as if to say, well. You tell it everything and water it anyway. Before sleep, you write this line, unadorned, in your notebook. Confluence is when the world and I keep our promises at the same time. Then you add a note in the margin, because you are still you. Also, buy milk. You turn off the light. The bed lifts and settles once, the world's quiet nod. In the darkness, the hum is no longer a visitor. It is the room. Your last thought before the tide of sleep takes you is not an idea, but an image, a hand and another hand meeting over water, and the water holding both without choosing. You walk to the shore before the day commits to being day, the kind of blue hour that holds its breath between bird song and street noise. The sand is cool and pocked with last night's stories, gull prints like punctuation, a child's castle softened into thesis, a spiral you didn't draw and can't ignore. The water is almost level with your ankles without touching them, the sort of closeness that feels like a conversation waiting for the first word. The horizon hums. You wouldn't call it sound. It lives lower than that. Hip bones, spine, the quiet bowl of your ribs. It's not loud and it's not insistent. It is simply there, continuous, as if someone finally found the thread that runs through everything and laid it on the table. You stand still so it can pass through you without snagging. Behind you, the parking lot is still mostly empty, a reminder that solitude can look like freedom until it remembers to dress as fear. The old hallway feeling pads up, your body's unglamorous alarmist, checking exit signs in daylight. Alone on a beach at the edge of a changed world. What could be more reasonable than a little unease? You let it stand beside you, an usher with a flashlight you don't need but don't refuse. The ocean does not hurry you. The hum is patient with both of you. Close life detail comes in on an ordinary wave. The scent of sunscreen from a forgotten bottle in your tote. The grit of a granola bar wrapper that somehow survived every pocket you've ever used. The tick of a wristwatch that has never kept perfect time and seems to have given up the pretense. You drink from a bottle, and the water tastes faintly like metal, faintly like stone, faintly like the word, remember if remember had a flavor. Far offshore, a smooth, unhurried bulge, whales surfacing like careful commas. Closer, a ribbon of reflected sky running toward you along the face of a swell. Beneath, you can just see the slow lanterning of plankton, the afterlight that was left when the micro-orbs sank and became reef and pulse. The world does not flaunt its newness. It wears it like a wedding ring, unmistakable up close, invisible from far, altering everything anyway. The hum resolves into something your mind can call intervals. 2, 3, 5. Then a rest you know too well, a kindness the length of a breath, a place to set your thought down before lifting it again. You think of the message, "We were never gone," and how "we" has grown like a doorway. You had assumed it meant sky intelligence, sea intelligence. Now you suspect it has always included you. You were just late to your own pronoun. A question sidles in and sits on the sand as if it is paid for a seat. If memory can be stored in water and light, what part of you has been remembering this without your permission? You let the question stay, because evicting it would be louder than hosting it. The tide inches forward as if to hear your answer with better acoustics. You walk the line where wet sand darkens into mirror. Your footsteps invent ellipses the next wave erases into agreement. Every few steps you find a shell and pick it up, and every time you put a shell to your ear, because habits that span childhood to now are information, the interior holds, not the roar you were told to expect, but the same softened hum the horizon gives. The ocean has been carrying a pocket-sized version of itself inside its smallest architecture. Have you ever imagined that a planet would hide field notes in conch spirals and then trust you to relearn reading? On the next headland, a lone figure stands with a tripod and a thermos. You don't approach. Witnessing requires its polite distances. Still, when the person lifts one hand without turning, you lift yours, 2 markers on a map that doesn't need names. The hum acknowledges both of you by refusing to become performance. The beach gives you 3 jokes in a row because it knows you travel better when laughter carries a corner. First, a crab scuttles toward your shoe, pauses, and raises both claws as if demanding your tide pool permit. You apologize and step around like you've been ticketed. Second, a gull lands further down and stares at the horizon with such solemnity you are briefly convinced it is the union representative for seabirds and you should be paying dues. Third, a wave rushes up to the ankles of a jogger who has trusted that it won't. The jogger yelps and then laughs so loudly the water seems to shrug. We're even. Levity is ballast. You take all 3 and feel steadier. At your feet, the receding foam laces itself into clean filigree, then dissolves. The pattern echoes the trench lattice you saw from the sub, the mirror plane that bent light, and the idea of reflection into something more like memory. You lean down and draw a quick triangle of dots in the skin of the sand, Vega, Deneb, Altair, and for a blink, a handful of cope pods answer with a faint, loyal glow. You grin like you're getting away with something holy. The hum deepens. Not a warning, a page turn. Across the face of the water, a long, slow heave travels, not swell, not wind. It reaches the pier to your left, and the pilings briefly shine with that interior light, like bone in an old X-ray. You imagine the micro-orb reefs far below exchanging attention through their luminous capillaries, and the whales adding punctuation with breath. You don't need a diagram. Your sternum draws one for you. A memory that is not yours arrives fully formed. You're standing on a shore built of different sand in a different century, with a different sky, listening to a different hum. Smoke from cooking fires competes with salt. A hand, not your hand, shades eyes, not your eyes. The water says something you can't translate because you do not own that alphabet, and yet the shape of the saying is identical. The long patience, the invitation to be a witness without making yourself solstice-sized. The scene dissolves not because it's finished, but because it was enough. You look up at now and realize time is not a line when the planet chooses chorus.
You pull your notebook from your pocket, because there are phrases that must be caught before they evaporate into air that already has so much to carry. You write, "Echo is not after. Echo is with." You add a grocery line because you are a person who will still need olive oil, olives, milk. It comforts you that the list can host both. A boy in a red hoodie balances on a driftwood log, arms wide, pretending it is a ship. The ship pretends it is balanced because he believes. His guardian holds a paper cup with both hands like it contains weather. The boy calls to the water without words. The water sends a small, polite swell that rocks his imaginary deck exactly once and then steadies. You are supposed to ask yourself a question here, and you do. What is the smallest balance you can keep that the world will feel? It is not rhetorical. It is homework. The hum arrives to a subtle crest. You feel it less as volume and more as clarity, the way the world looks right after you clean your glasses with the shirt you shouldn't have used. Somewhere behind and under everything, stone moves a millimeter where it has not moved in a while, and a root near a cliff says thank you in whatever grammar joining uses. The air seems to lighten by a thumb's breadth. You stand taller without meaning to. The fear returns for a final sweep, checking the thin places, thumping its tail against your shins like a dog who's done its patrol and found only familiar shadows. You scratch it behind the ear in your mind. Come on, you tell it, which is how you release both of you. The horizon does not clap. It has never asked you to prove anything. You take one deliberate step into the water. It's colder than you've been pretending, a clean sentence around your ankles. The hum enters your bones with the tide and leaves with it, leaving a warmth the water did not supply. You look out to where the whales left parentheses, and the orbs wrote commas, and the sky learned mirror from the sea. You do not pray and you do not declare. You do what witnesses do when the testimony is complete for the morning. You hold still, you breathe, you remember. Have you ever imagined a memory older than civilization choosing your skeleton as its instrument for a day? You have now. The horizon hums once more, long and level, and your whole body agrees to be a tuning fork. You feel a thought finish that has been walking toward you since the first tide found the first rock on the first moonlit night. You belong to the sentence that holds the world together. You turn from the water because staying is not the only form of reverence. Behind you, the lot is filling with lives that will always be half in a hurry, and that is fine. You tie your shoe, double knot because practical politics, sip the last sweetish inch of your bottle, and start back. The hum does not diminish when you leave it. It keeps your pace, shoulder to shoulder, like an old friend whose silence is the exact right size. The world wakes gently, as though it's learning how to rise without breaking the dream. You move through it like someone adjusting to a lighter gravity. Steps slower, heartbeat steady, thoughts no longer jostling for attention. Outside, the horizon glows in gradients that no one has bothered to name yet. Soft violet, folding into silver, then into a kind of living blue that feels more like breath than color. You walk toward the pier one last time. The planks are damp beneath your shoes, polished by mist and moonlight. The sea is calmer than you've ever seen it. The surface looks like brushed glass, reflecting the faint shimmer of the micro-orb reefs beneath. The glow no longer radiant, just content. The water hums with life, but the sound is no longer foreign. It's the same rhythm as your pulse. You stand at the edge, watching the horizon pulse in slow motion. The air has that early morning stillness where sound travels too clearly. A dog barking half a mile away, a boat engine murmuring like memory. It feels like the world is whispering just for you.
You've been part of this story long enough to recognize what's happening now. The merge is complete. The conversation between the sea and the stars has reached understanding. The glow beneath the waves fades from vivid to subtle, like a candle learning the language of dawn. And above, the remnants of Three-Eye Atlas shimmer one last time, not as a comet anymore, but as a filament of light stretching across the upper atmosphere, like a bridge closing its final span. You remember how it began, the strange hum, the descent, the fear of being alone, the thought that maybe the ocean was watching. But that fear has changed shape. It's not about being alone anymore. It's about being seen, completely, gently, without judgment. A small fishing boat drifts nearby, its light casting a golden path across the water. The captain waves absently as he passes, just a human acknowledging another presence in the same story. The simple gesture feels profound. You wave back, and the moment folds itself neatly into memory. You notice something at the water's edge, a shimmer of movement, faint and deliberate. A jellyfish drifts near the surface, its bell pulsing slowly, refracting light from below, but within it, impossibly, glows a small pattern of symbols. Not random, not organic. The same geometry you saw in the trench, the same lattice. You kneel. The creature hovers near the pier, its light flickering like a heartbeat. It doesn't flee. It's not afraid of you. For a moment, it feels as if the entire ocean is observing this tiny exchange through it. The deep communicating through a single filament of life. You nod. The jellyfish drifts back into the depths, the light dissolving into the water until all that's left is a faint ripple, a small signature saying thank you in a dialect you can now almost understand. You sit down on the edge of the pier, legs dangling above the slow tide. The water laps softly against the wooden posts, like a lullaby. You think of all the questions that remain unanswered, the where, the why, the who. But those feel smaller now, less urgent, because maybe, you realize, mystery doesn't need to be solved. It only needs to be shared. You think about the world before, the noise, the rush, the separation, how every conversation was a collision instead of a current, how we all forgot to listen for the deeper pulse, and now somehow that pulse has found its way back into everything. You close your eyes and breathe. The sound of the waves fades into the hum of your own body. For the first time, there's no boundary between the two. The universe feels smaller now, but kinder. The stars above are not unreachable, they are kin. The ocean below is not endless, it is home, and you for once are exactly where you belong. Between them, part of both, dissolving into neither. You think of one final question, one that has been waiting quietly since the beginning. What happens if the story doesn't end? You smile. It doesn't have to. It never did. The sky brightens slowly, as if dawn is afraid to wake the dream too suddenly. The hum that once vibrated through oceans and hearts now lingers only as a soft pulse under your skin, a rhythm you could forget, but won't. The air smells of salt and new beginnings. You rise from the pier and begin to walk. The boards creak softly beneath your feet, a sound so small it feels sacred. With each step, the horizon widens and the light grows warmer. The world stretches awake around you, gulls tracing lazy arcs, the first human voices of morning surfacing like bubbles. You walk until you reach the sand again. It's cool, soft, forgiving. The waves draw close, then recede, then return again, as if reluctant to let you go. You whisper your thanks to them, to the sea, the stars, the quiet listeners beneath the surface. There's no grand farewell, no burst of light, no final message, just a gentle knowing that everything which once felt separate has learned to move together again. The line between earth and sky has softened. The silence is no longer empty. You look once more toward the horizon. The last trace of the comet's light lingers faintly, dissolving into daylight. The bridge is complete. The world has learned to breathe as one. The wind rises, cool and patient, brushing against your hair, your face, the pulse at your throat. It feels like the planet is whispering goodbye, or maybe good morning. You take a long breath, tasting salt and sun and the sweetness of being alive inside a story that chose not to end in destruction, but in understanding. You feel the rhythm inside you, slow, steady, infinite. You realize it's not the ocean anymore. It's you. The harmony has nested itself in your bones, in your blood, in every quiet corner of thought. You smile at that, at the idea that maybe this was always how it was meant to be. The stars speaking to the sea answering, and the human heart remembering how to listen. You turn away from the water and begin to walk home. The sand clings to your feet. The air hums softly with life. Behind you, the tide rolls in one last time, reaching toward your footprints, smoothing them away, not erasing, but remembering. At the horizon, the light finally breaks. The world exhales, and in that gentle breath, the story lingers, not finished, not forgotten, but alive. Now, dreamers and wanderers, if you're still awake, take this quiet with you. Carry it into your morning, into your work, into the small, breathing world you inhabit. And if you find a moment to listen, truly listen, you might still hear it. That faint hum, that soft heartbeat, the sound of the earth remembering you. Good night, dreamer.